There is power in a union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There is power in a union of many lands. Power, come and reach across the borders. Power, come and open up your eyes. Power, we stand and fight together. Power when we organize. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize. Power, when we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A criminal probe into Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker's 2012 recall campaign's coordination with right-wing groups was stopped Thursday by the conservative-dominated Wisconsin Supreme Court. A group of prosecutors, including Republican prosecutors, had been investigating possible illegal coordination between Scott Walker's campaign and the conservative organizations. An aggressive legal attack from one of those groups, the Wisconsin Club for Growth, sought to stop the criminal probe, and Wisconsin's High Court did step in and stop the criminal probe for those groups. Some of the Wisconsin Supreme Court justices refused to recuse themselves from this case, even though they received millions of dollars in campaign funds from these right-wing groups. The Wisconsin Supreme Court ordered the criminal probe against Walker stopped and all evidence gathered in the investigation permanently destroyed. Francis Schmitz, the lead prosecutor in the investigation against Walker's campaign, says one or more of the justices should not have heard this case because the right-wing groups that were being investigated had spent millions of dollars helping elect those Supreme Court justices. The U.S. Labor Department this week issued a clarification on classifying workers as independent contractors or employees. The Labor Department issued a 15-page memo clarifying how workers are to be classified under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Labor Secretary Thomas Perez says misclassification of workers is a major issue. He says when workers are misclassified, they miss out on overtime pay and benefits like unemployment insurance and workers' comp. Perez says it also lets companies avoid state and federal taxes that support employee benefits. Chicago home care and child care workers are protesting state budget cuts they say are inflicting pain on working families statewide. They're demanding that Governor Bruce Rauner rescind tax breaks for big corporations and renegotiate toxic swap and other predatory bank deals to generate more revenue. The workers and their community allies want the governor to work with state lawmakers for a quick resolution to the state budget, and they want the state government to choose revenue over cuts to home care, child care, and other vital services. New Jersey workers lost a state Supreme Court case this week as the court upheld cuts imposed by 3 municipalities back in 2009. Unions had argued that the cities were required to collectively bargain over those cuts, which included mandatory furloughs. During his 5 years in office, Governor Chris Christie has managed to put 3 Republicans on the state high court. They agreed that unpaid furloughs could be imposed without bargaining with the workers. Dissenting from that ruling, though, was Justice Barry Albin. He wrote that the ruling sweeps away nearly 50 years of this court's public sector labor jurisprudence.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by Ulico. For more than 85 years, Ulico has been protecting union workers with quality, affordable insurance while responsibly investing union funds to create jobs and achieve respectable returns. More information is available online at ulico.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Yeah.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. It is the end of the Peepergate week. I'm going to take a look back at the Scott Wagner showing off his toys. First it's the helicopter, now it's the not one, but two brand new iPhone 6s. And I still want to know, what have those cameras, what have they unearthed in almost a month of operation? And I got to tell you, I want to know. Inquiring minds want to know who's going in and out of his office, and it's now there. We now there's information there that he's gotten us that we need to get our hands on, which is why I'm glad that Sean has put in a right to know request. Will help us figure out who's coming and going out of that office. If he's so concerned, I think we should know as well. Also going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Greece. I think we should pay attention to Greece, honestly, because this is the conservative, this is going to be the playbook. This is what they've been doing for at least a generation now, creating these massive debts, creating these crises, and what's going on there is what they're going to want to do here. It is, we'll give you a little bit, but we want everything else in return. So it'll be interesting to find out what's going on there. Also, Wingnut Friday. It is the Wingnut Week in Review. Our friends from the Campaign for America's Future are going to be here talking a little bit about how crazy the week has been. And, there have been some doozies. The fight between the Donald and Rick Perry. Oh, very, very. See, this is the kind of stuff that's going to be interesting. Going to be fun stuff. Also, the announcement by Scott Walker that he is in. And he got good news on Thursday. They're not going to continue to probe anymore, I guess. But this just means the national media will have something to look into, I think. So all that and so very much more. Your thoughts, your questions, your comments, whatever's on your mind. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So it was on Wednesday I saw this story out of New York City. And it's one that I had known about, I'd been following a little bit. Not a big Papa John's fan. Ever since Papa Gianni's came out and talked about Obamacare and how he was going to cut, his employees down to 29 hours a week, and just so he wouldn't have to pay all that. You remember the whole shenanigans. And one, hasn't happened because he realized most of my places are franchisees. Other people own most of it, so it's really not going to affect me. And I got myself into trouble opening my big trap. I guess that kind of gave thoughts to the franchisees, who evidently one of them here recently was found. Well, actually, he pled guilty to cheating his workers out of wages. And I give Attorney General Schneiderman credit for pursuing wage theft cases. In fact, this is, from what I understand, the very first wage theft case in New York that someone's going to go to jail over. Now, the guy who pled guilty, he will be, from what I understand, sentenced to 60 days in jail. He's going to have to pay about $230,000 back in wages that he stole from his employees. And I got to think that number's got to be higher. And this was just the deal that was made. But I love the CBS News reporting. And they point out that this was the first criminal case by Schneiderman's office against the fast food franchise owner over alleged wage theft. It's no longer alleged when the guy pleads guilty. Convicted of wage theft is what it should read, but they keep throwing that alleged. No alleged. Wage theft is very real. And, you talk to people in fast food, you talk to people in retail, you talk to people in home health care workers, you talk to anybody in the low-wage economy. Talk to any of those workers in the low-wage economy, and what you find out is they're getting screwed all the time. In fact, you may remember at the beginning of the month we talked about that report that came out from Temple University's Scheller Center for Social Justice. And they found out here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, each week, about $32 million is stolen from workers. About $32 million is not going into the pockets of the people who are earning it. Simply, cheating them out of overtime, cheating them out of unreimbursed expenses, cheating them out of tips, cheating them out of minimum wage, clocking them out, making them work off the clock, all kinds of stuff. Or just flat out not paying them. But about $32 million each and every week. And, it's according to the Scheller Center. This is like the tip of the iceberg. I mean, to them, they said wage theft is pervasive across the economy, especially, like I said, in restaurants, home healthcare workers, and those people at the bottom end of the workforce. They point out about 130,000 workers in Philadelphia. About 11% of the workforce there in Philadelphia experience wage theft any given week. In fact, 40% of the workers surveyed in Philly's restaurant industry said that they had worked off the clock without pay. And, who do you think fills the salt shakers? Who do you think wraps up the little napkins with the silverware in it? And who do you think does all of that prep work? It's these people who, a lot of them are getting cheated off the clock. And, again, I go back to this amazing, one of these amazing statistics. 90% of home health care workers reported being forced to work off the clock. That to me is just, wow, it just blows my mind, but not surprising. Because I think back to stories and situations that I've seen in my lifetime over the years. The one thing that I can absolutely say, without question, in the 20 years that I worked in the trucking industry, an industry that is just ripe with wage theft, constantly stealing time from workers. You go into one of these distribution centers and you sit for hours on end. There's traffic. You're sitting hours on end. You're not getting paid for that stuff. I think about that. In the 20 years that I was a truck driver, I didn't get a dime stolen from me. I got every penny that I was entitled to, and that was not because I was, I'm going to hold them responsible. It's because I had a union. It was that simple. I had the Teamsters card in my pocket, and if you wanted to cheat me out of a digit, I filed a grievance for it, and I used to. I would file a grievance on one digit, which is 6 minutes. With the mindset of if you're going to cheat me out of it, I'm going to fight to get it back. And I had the mechanism to do that. These workers don't. These folks don't have that opportunity, which is why you're seeing the fast food campaign going on right now. You're seeing the fight for 15 and a union. You're seeing them saying, yeah, we want a living wage, but we also want a mechanism to make sure that we don't continually get ripped off. And it's not surprising to me that this is going on. What is kind of surprising is that there's an attorney general in this country who's willing to step forward and stand up for these workers. So you got to then wonder, just how obnoxious, just how, blatant was this one franchise owner there in New York City? How blatant was he? How bad did it have to get? Especially when, as I pointed out from the Temple University study, $32 million each and every week stolen from workers, without the mechanism to say, hey, I want it back. And to me, this franchise thing, something that seriously has to be looked at. Because do you remember, it was last year sometime, and I forget exactly when, but there was a woman from New Jersey, and you may remember me talking about this because I talked about it for about 2 weeks. A woman from New Jersey was found dead behind a Wawa. She had pulled in to take a nap in her car because she was exhausted. Evidently left the motor running, and it had an exhaust leak. The exhaust leak filled the car with fumes, and she succumbed to the fumes. You find out that she was working at 3 different Dunkin' Donuts, 3 different franchises, and she was working like 60, 70 hours every week, driving between the 3 of them. Basically, her life was going from one Dunkin' Donuts to another. Working all of these hours, not getting overtime, none of that. In fact, didn't qualify to be full-time in any of them. And she was running herself ragged because we've allowed the Dunkin' Donuts of the world, and not just them, it's all of them, to be able to skirt the law by saying, well, Dunkin' Donuts doesn't own that. That's owned by Joe Bob, and Joe Bob just buys from us. At some point, don't you think we have to start, I don't know, holding somebody responsible? Just kind of a thought. But it's good at least one attorney general in this country is going after the thieves. And I'm glad to see one of them going to jail finally. Maybe we could get our attorney general, Kathleen Kane, to go, you know what, let's go after some of those wage theft cases. It might actually bring up her popularity. Just kind of a thought. Anyway, let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Time to talk.
Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. A crew of mostly black soldiers were loading munitions onto ships at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine in California, northeast of Oakland. 320 soldiers were killed by a munitions explosion that wounded another 390 people. Troops were segregated. Black enlisted men were often given the worst and most dangerous non-combat jobs. All of the munition loaders at Port Chicago were African American. Every officer was white. The sailors were not given proper training in the loading of ammunition. The idea of loading munitions scared the soldiers. The officers lied and said the job was safe and that the weapons could not explode. They were wrong. The explosion caused a giant fireball that killed everyone on the ship and on the pier. The explosion could be heard 200 miles away. Of the 320 people killed, 202 were black. Only 51 bodies could be identified. Ordinarily, soldiers traumatized by the death of fellow soldiers were given 30 days leave. None of the black soldiers, not even those who were hospitalized, got leave. All of the white officers did. Surviving soldiers refused to load munitions. For that, they were arrested. 40 were charged with mutiny. The rest of the soldiers were also punished. They were sent to the Pacific Theater, forced to do menial duty. Many received bad conduct discharges at the end of the war, making them ineligible for military benefits. Those charged with mutiny were sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. When World War II ended, the imprisoned soldiers' sentences were reduced to 2 years. And in 1999, President Bill Clinton pardoned one of the survivors, 79-year-old Freddie Meeks. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. A deceptive video from a conservative group purports to show a Planned Parenthood official discussing prices for the illegal sale of fetal tissue from abortions. But on the Austin, Texas CBS affiliate's News at 10, Adam Hammonds reported,
Planned Parenthood says a full version shows Nuka-Cola saying they don't sell fetal tissue. It's all donated. Plus, there are a lot of edits, like here, where the video skips 8 minutes. Planned Parenthood said opponents have told lies about them for decades, saying their claims fall apart on closer examination, just as they do in this case.
In fact, mainstream media outlets including the New York Times, The Guardian, Huffington Post, and the Daily Beast have also called out a conservative group for deceptively editing a video. The full unedited footage shows the official discussing the reimbursement cost of consensual legal tissue donations. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
They want to wrap the kids around themselves and say it's about the kids, and it's not. We have 180,000 teachers in the state of Pennsylvania. If we laid off 10% of the teachers in Pennsylvania, we'd never miss them.
I am the eye in the sky, looking at you. I can read your mind. I am the maker of rules, dealing with fools. I can cheat you blind.
Yes, so while he's playing Eye in the Sky, our good Senator Scott Wagner, on one frame looking down on us from the helicopter, well, he's got his other toys out, the cameras that are checking our footwear, and potentially, as I've been saying, this could be a Peepergate scandal. Maybe he's looking for Hello Kitty underwear. I don't know. Just seems weird to me, and not surprising. To be right out in front, not surprising from the senator there, and just very twisted to me. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. The budget overdue. Nobody in town to do any actual work. What's going on? Not quite sure, which is why we've asked Jerry Alexiak, he's the vice president over at PSEA, to come talk with us, and maybe a little bit about the paranoid caucus over there in the Pennsylvania Senate. Jerry, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. Unfortunately, I need to run to my blood pressure medication after hearing that quote again from Scott Wagner. That's just, it's terrible.
Yeah, well, what it is, it's just saying your members, the teachers in this Commonwealth, that they're not important. We don't need them as a society. We could get rid of all of them. We wouldn't miss it. If you listen to that kind of insane rhetoric.
It is insane, and you're right. It shows this complete lack of respect and understanding for what we do, and it also shows a complete lack of understanding of the very recent past. When teachers were being laid off and other education professionals, support professionals are being laid off, the people responded by saying no to the governor that did it. So he's out of touch with what the people want as well.
And maybe this is an opportunity for the people of his district to show him how out of touch he is and send him back to the trash heap.
That would be fine with me. He could fly his helicopter as much as he wants.
Yeah, but the thing that's scary to me, and I got to be honest, I'm the helicopter thing. I get, you're going to take up a reporter up in the air and say, see, everything down there is just fine. The grass is cut, the building looks okay. There's fields over there, everything's great, and you're going to try and trying to manipulate a reporter to side with you. I kind of get that, but this thing with the cameras, are you knocking over his sign, Jerry? I mean, is that what's going on?
I have seen the signs. I haven't seen that one. He's had other signs, but no, I am not knocking over any signs. When I saw it, I had several reactions. I thought it was silly. Somebody asked me. I have a beard, and somebody asked me if that was me in the Kool-Aid. I was saying, no, that's absolutely the governor. It's silly on so many levels, and then to find out that he's got the cameras by the fire extinguishers. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is the Onion in real life.
Yeah.
This is so silly. You don't know where to begin to comment.
How much of this do you think? Because my initial reaction was this is simply a distraction that they threw out so that we might stop talking about the fact that we still don't have a budget and they're not doing their job and they're not listening to what the voters of this Commonwealth wanted, which is funding for education in our schools.
Exactly, and to the governor's credit, when they did give him a budget that was, as we were calling it, Corbett's fifth budget, the governor vetoed it as well he should. He vetoed Senate Bill 1 as well he should, and he vetoed the privatization of the wine and spirit shops as he should. They could get this done if people would back off the ideology and do what's best for Pennsylvania, for our communities and our schools, and particularly that it's not often that education is the number one issue in an election, and it was. And the people made it very clear what they want. They're upset. And it's not just the union that's upset. It's the members of the community, parents, kids that have lost out. And this governor, again, to his credit, went big. He wants to do it right, and he wants to do it right away.
Right.
And what's going on in Harrisburg is not helping to get that done.
And it's not. It appears to me, and look, I've got a lot of friends who are Republicans, and I've been telling them recently, it looks like the Republican Party has gone crazy with their obsession at attacking teachers, and especially, teachers' representatives. I mean, last week we spoke with John Eichelberger, my state senator, who had this bizarre thought that people are calling me and talking to me on the street. They're harassing, intimidating me. And I'm going, where's this paranoia coming from? Or did you never have constituents call you and express their dismay at what you're doing?
Well, I'm sure they have, but when when people in the middle class, like teachers, do organize and get their act together and have a voice, then all of a sudden there's this vast conspiracy, or we're out to get them. We're out to protect our schools and our members and our students, and they need to understand that that's what this advocacy is about. It's not harassment, it's advocacy. It's speaking out as we are entitled to as citizens. Speaking out for what we believe in.
I had the good senator on the program last week, and I give him credit. He came on to defend his position, and I simply asked him, which part of the First Amendment don't you agree with?
Right.
Because he actually said, well, some of it's really distasteful. And I said, you know what's really distasteful? You trying to steal someone's pension.
Yes, and how did he respond to that?
No, you got to give these politicians credit. They take those comments and they just let him go and go. They were harassing. Went back to he was harassing me.
Yeah. Well, exercising your freedom of speech is not harassing anyone. If you, we're not out there to harass. We're out there to get our point across.
I mean, I would have to think that harassing and intimidating would be making saying that the teachers' organizations are like the Kool-Aid Man. I'm still trying to figure out this idiotic poster.
Well, it's funny. One of our staff members, we were talking about it, and I said, "You're overanalyzing this. You're too smart for your own good, trying to figure out what exactly that says." It was a little bit all over the place, and if you do look at it seriously, it is insulting. It is childish, but it's also just beyond comment. What are you going to do with somebody that does things like that and says you could fire 10% of the teachers and it wouldn't make a difference? It's somebody that's so out of touch with what goes on in real communities, in real schools with real people, that it almost defies logic.
Look, I would be okay with it and not have a bit of problem if he was just some crank walking up and down in front of the Capitol building with a sandwich board. But this guy is a sitting state senator. This guy is in an office that I have respect for. And when he does idiotic things like the chopper thing and now the camera thing and all of these posts, I think it loses dignity. I think it loses respect for the office.
I agree, but what it's hard to then explain why he's becoming more powerful. It seems that he helped to shift the balance of power even more in the Senate, and
I would think money has an awful lot to do with that.
Well, that's exactly where I was going. He's proving that money can play a very powerful role, as we all know,
especially tax dollars.
Political process. Well, I know if he's using tax dollars to spy on people that don't like his sign, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I know.
Well, sure. I mean, I would argue all of his wealth came from We the People, because he was able to get those contracts of tax dollars that went into building his trash empire. And the reality is another example of why, in my view, privatization not such a good idea.
And I think the irony appears lost on the senator that that's where his money comes from, and he's attacking other public service employees. It doesn't make sense.
Very, very twisted. So let me ask you, when a lot of people are talking about the budget, there's some news today that Representative DiGirolamo has got a plan out to maybe bridge some of the middle ground between the Republicans and the governor.
Right.
How much talk is going on? Because look, there's Harrisburg's like a ghost town now. Everyone's back in their districts, I guess, because it's vacation time with no budget, which blows my mind. But there's got to be something being done, right?
Well, what do you hear? Because that's it. We just hear. You hear things that, they're talking, and they're getting close, or they're not close. And Representative DiGirolamo, one of the few moderate Republicans left, he has an alternative plan, as he had before. When Governor Corbett was in power, he had an alternative budget that makes a lot of sense. And hopefully there are people like that are still talking. But you tell me, when is this going to get done? I remember Governor Rendell's first budget wasn't done until December. So who knows where this is going to go? And people are becoming more and more entrenched, and it's going to be a very difficult process ahead, I think.
You know, in looking at this, you know, the question then becomes, the longer this draws on, you know, who does this hurt? Does it bring, you know, the fiscal conservatives? Does it wake them up and say that their party's gone too far? Does it hurt the governor and having folks on his side saying, hey, you know what, our schools aren't going to get the funding they need? You know, where do you see this going?
Well, I don't mean to be evasive, but I don't know. I think the question you posed is exactly it. Who is going to, you know, you hate to compare it to a game of chicken, but who's going to blink first? Who's going to say? And there's going to be pressure on both sides in both parties, you know, to make some compromises that are maybe beyond compromises, and really backing away from some of the things that matter to you in order to get this done. That's not going to help anybody either. You really need the adults in the room to sit down and say what's in the best interest of the folks of Pennsylvania, and what's fair when it comes to things like taxes, and what can we do to help our schools that have been devastated by the recent cuts. It doesn't make a rocket science to figure out where the needs are and what would work, but the ideology gets in the way, and I couldn't begin to predict right now where it's going to go.
Wow, the fact that we need adults in the room, well, that doesn't give me hope. When you see childish stunts like we see with Senator Wagner's cameras, you know, I think back. I was 7, I think, when I first got walkie-talkies, and I kind of tried the same thing as a 7-year-old, and I learned then at 7, after my mother gave me a good whipping, not to do that again. I think at some point our good senator needs at least an electoral whipping to put him into place, I think.
That would be appropriate. I think at some point, as you alluded to earlier, the people of this district have to say, this is not what we want. This is not the kind of representation we want in the Pennsylvania Senate.
So I'm not going to get any predictions out of you about when you think the budget's going to happen, because I have no idea.
If I could make accurate predictions, I'd hang up from you and I'd be heading to some casino, because you know it's anybody's guess.
Just don't go to the Trump Casino in Atlantic City. They're on strike right now.
That wouldn't happen.
But Jerry, I appreciate your thoughts. I appreciate you coming on and talking with us.
Thank you, Rick, and good luck.
Always great talking with you, Jerry Elixiak, Vice President of the Pennsylvania State Education Association. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out. Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. What? Billions off our backs, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money, we work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations, it's next. One day longer. One day longer.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
It's Thursday, July 16, 2015.
I know I'm not a scientist, but here's the problem I've got with some people in my party.
Senator Lindsey Graham chides his fellow Republican candidates on global warming. Regional cap-and-trade programs bringing in the big bucks. Dirty coal is on the way out in the U.S. Plus,
we can be part of something that actually makes a difference to our future.
The climate action movement gets a big assist from a big boy band.
All of those big boys and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They're trying to regulate the amount of mercury emitted by power plants in the U.S.
Oh, great. More regulation. What next? How much feces they can put in our food? Big government. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I see you've got a story today about Lindsey Graham, the only one pretty much in the entire panoply of GOP candidates who actually isn't a full-on denier. Are you going to be making fun of him?
Actually, no, because I really appreciate the fact that he is not a total full-on denier.
I'm disappointed. I would have made fun of him, but all right, what do you got?
Go ahead. A Republican presidential candidate, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, against members of his own party who don't accept the science behind climate change this week in an interview with late-night host Seth Meyers.
I know I'm not a scientist, but here's the problem I've got with some people in my party. When you ask the scientists what's going on, why don't you believe them? Right. If I went to 10 doctors and 9 said, hey, you're going to die, and 1 says you're fine, why would I believe the 1 guy? Right.
Okay, good point, but will it be enough to make anybody notice that Lindsey Graham is running for president in the Republican Party?
At this point, probably not.
Too bad, because on this point, he's absolutely right, which is one of the reasons why he will never win the nomination for the Republican Party.
Bad news for King Coal. For the first time in U.S. history, coal is no longer the dominant fuel source for the nation's electricity. According to an independent industry analysis, as of April of this year, cheaper, cleaner-burning natural gas has displaced coal as the top source of electricity. It now generates more than 30% of U.S. electricity, in part due to the fracking boom in the United States.
So sad to hear about coal.
Yeah, but then it does mean that fracking continues.
Yeah, well, pick your poison. But it's the beginning of the end for coal. So one battle at a time, Desi Doyen.
Well, it is definitely the beginning of the end for coal in Iowa. An electric utility company has agreed to phase out coal at 5 of its generating units in Iowa as part of a settlement with the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Justice to resolve violations of the Clean Air Act as part of a lawsuit brought by the Sierra Club. Alliant Energy will pay a $1.1 million fine, install pollution controls, and switch to cleaner burning natural gas or face shutdown. It's the 200th coal plant to shut down in the U.S. as part of the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign.
So sad.
States that have implemented regional carbon cap and trade programs are polluting less, and their economies are doing great.
That can't be. Chris Christie told us that cap and trade programs do not work, and that's why he pulled out of the regional cap and trade agreement up in the Northeast just weeks after he met with David Koch in a secret meeting in New York. But that's just a coincidence.
Well, for more details, that Northeast Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, also called RGGI, is an agreement by 9 northeastern states to cut the carbon dioxide emitted by their power plants. That program generated nearly $250 million for the Massachusetts economy and more than $1 billion for the other northeastern partner states. All money that Chris Christie and New Jersey will not be getting. And it cut the region's greenhouse gas emissions that cause global warming. Bloomberg News reports that the global race for renewable energy has passed a turning point. According to Bloomberg's global analysis, the world is now adding more electricity capacity with renewable energy each year than coal, natural gas, and oil combined. The shift occurred in 2013, according to Bloomberg, and it will continue to accelerate. Bloomberg projects that by 2030, 4 times as much new renewable electricity generation capacity will be built than fossil fuel power plants.
A lot of good news in this report, Desi Doyen. You feeling all right?
Yeah, I think actually some good things are happening, so it's important to talk about it.
All right.
Finally, the movement for climate action just got a big assist in reaching today's teenage girls. The insanely popular British boy band One Direction has launched a campaign to get their fans engaged in acting on climate change.
Please, will you join us to put pressure on our leaders? Become part of Action 1D. Make your voice heard and make 2015 the year we changed our futures forever.
Their new website to mark the launch of their campaign is called Action 1D for One Direction.
Does it matter that I don't really even know who One Direction is?
No, you're not their target audience.
It just makes me old, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For much more on all of the stories we covered today and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Old man.
That's what makes you beautiful.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm just an average man with an average life. I work from 9 to 5. Hey, hell, I pay the price. All I want is to be left alone in my average home. But why do I always feel like I'm in the twilight zone? And I always feel like somebody's watching me.
Especially when you're standing in front of Senator Scott Wagner's office. Although now you can go there, rest assured, the cameras are now down. Evidently, the cameras have been taken down. The last bit of information I've gotten, the cameras have been removed. My question, who's going to pay for the damage done to the fire extinguisher holders as they rip the duct tape off of the finish off of them? I mean, really, you want to talk about vandalism? You want to talk about destruction of property? I guarantee there'll be something left on. Are they going to pay to have those boxes refinished? Is that going to happen? I don't know. Is that going to happen?
I don't know, but who's going to pay for that electric bill?
Oh, that's another part of it. Who pays the electric bill?
But one thing's rest assured, we can go back to scientific now.
And here's the thing that gets me. They've had those cameras in place for now reportedly almost a month, and nothing. There's been nothing. Because if there was something, it would have been out by now.
It would have been a fundraiser email or something like that. And the one thing that amazes me is how they said this was a non-story.
Oh, no, this is definitely a story. In my view, most certainly a story in that a couple of things. One, delusional. Absolutely delusional. Somebody's tipping over my curmudgeon. He's tipping over my son. He's the guy if you live next door.
Off my yard.
Exactly. He's the guy. Get off my yard, you drum. And the other part of it is his wanton disregard for rules. I mean, the cameras should have been put in place by the Capitol Police, not any Tom, Dick. If this is the case, I should be able to go in and put a camera in front of his door. If that's the case, because that's as much my office as it is his.
Yeah, I think we should just have someone sitting there for a week when they're back and just holding their cell phone out the whole entire time.
Well, I think you can do that. We could do that, but no, I want to affix it to something and put it right there, and maybe even try and camouflage it with duct tape. Really? I don't know. You know, it's one of these things that you go, you know, the paranoid caucus taking over, just taking over the GOP. I'm wondering who's next. Which bit of paranoia is going to come next? And you know, the really scary part of this is there's part of me that thinks these guys are so good at political nonsense that this is just a stunt. That this is a diversionary tactic to get people going, oh, look over here, while they do all this nonsense over here.
And here's the thing, though. It came out during the last 2 weeks of the budget, but they've been up for like the last couple of weeks now. I'm surprised no one found them earlier. I guess because you're just like you're not paying attention, you're not looking down.
Or you probably thought the duct tape was holding the box together. You know, who knows? But my take on it is if they've had those cameras for a month and someone was tipping over their signs, because if you remember, they were saying, oh, they were tipping over our signs all the time. They were ripping the tag off our door and throwing. They were beating against the door all the time. Don't you remember all those stories? Tons of them. If that were the case, in a month, I guarantee you one idiot would have done that. At least once in a month. If it was happening as often as they said it was happening. That it was so bad, it was so invasive and so much vandalism to their signs, you would think in a month's time there'd be at least one instance.
That's right. If that was happening with all the hidden cameras that have gone up in the Capitol since 9/11, you would think the Department of General Services or the Capitol Police would have been involved with this, with vandalism and ripping your nameplate off the door.
And again, you would have reported that to the Capitol Police, because it's my understanding there's a Capitol cop right down the road, right down the hall, isn't there?
At the end of the hallway, there's a Senate security officer, right? And then in the front doors is the Capitol Police when you go through the scanner right there. So maybe like in 50 feet in both directions, there's someone there watching over that area.
See, here's the other part of this. I don't believe people are tipping over the sign. I don't. Because you come back to this whole risk-reward thing. Okay, we're going to tip over his sign. Oh, and what damage? What did we do to make our point? Does anyone know you did it? No. But what's the ramification if you get caught? Whoever you're with, especially if it's a lobbyist, which I had heard originally. Some of the lobbyists were maybe been over. If you do that, your credibility is completely shot. So it's not going to be them. And it's one of those things where you just go at some point, just nuts.
It ain't going to be me. I might lose my press credentials. But the one thing is, you know, like I do see people, those signs do attract attention, and people go up to them and they take pictures of them. You know, I've run into some of the lobbyists doing that. They sit there, they point and laugh, and they walk on. They have that's it. That's the extent of the attention that those signs get. But here's my thing. Even if those signs were getting tipped over, you have someone, an ideologue over here, who has thrown all the rules of decorum out, right? I mean, you know, comparing union leaders to Adolf Hitler, Stalin, saying you're going to take it back to the Senate, saying unemployable people are using drugs. You are starting a flame war with everyone you disagree with. So when someone else just comes by and tips over your sign, you're going to act like this is disrespectful to you, like that the other side should just sit there and take it. No.
Yes, because that's what the king is used to. You know, and that's what he wants to be. He wants to be king. That's what he's used to. He's used to being able to throw his muscle around, throw his weight around, and no one be able to respond. Understand the world that he comes from. He comes from the world where he is king. He's the king of the trash heap. And the low-wage workers that work for him, they need those jobs, so they're not going to say anything to lose the job. So whatever you want, king, we'll do what you want. And he's used to getting everything he wants. And he's used to doing that kind of stuff, too. Putting cameras around because, uh-oh, someone moved my yogurt in the refrigerator. We're going to find him. And he's used to that kind of stuff. So he's going to use cameras. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. Our rules, our laws, our schools, our institutions, be damned. It's all about him. It's not about us. And that's, to me, a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, he's thin-skinned, and he can't take the heat when someone else starts messing with him. You know, I wonder what would happen if people start doing other things.
I think what I think should happen
his face and everyone just walk by and give him the middle finger as he's walking by. Like, would that get him upset? Probably.
You mean like when people are following John Eichelberger?
Tell him he's number one.
That's it. Give him the number one salute. Just nuts. But so you know, the cameras, I guess, are down. So we'll see where this goes. I'm surprised. I'm a little shocked by it. I thought he would be a guy who would, no, we're going to keep my cameras. And in fact, I thought he would come out with bigger cameras, just to be obnoxious. So it's going to be interesting over the next week to find out where this goes.
And I guess this is now an admission of guilt. Pie's on your face. You got it.
I'm thinking. Is there an apology?
And I don't think. I mean, I think I should be able to get these videos anyway because there was no official investigation going on. And what can they claim? Like those wires for that camera was going into their Senate Majority Caucus room.
Yeah, but they could argue there were solar packs or something that were running them, or who knows what.
But okay, if they're taking video constantly, it has to be on a computer server somewhere.
Yeah,
and if it's on a private server inside someone's office.
Now we got other questions to be asking about.
Yeah.
Once you start following that cord, once you get beyond the other side of that door, this could open up to be something much larger than just an idiot taping a camera to a box.
Maybe they weren't even running the whole time. Who knows?
It's possible, too. We'll see. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Look back again, you fight on to the end. Together we will live on forevermore. This land we have defended from all things dark and cruel. Now we are defenseless.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Your standard governor, Congress critter, and other elected officials routinely insist that they represent the people. But when it comes to making public policy, do they actually represent you or Mr. Money, who writes big campaign checks? Right. Any pretension that we live in a self-governing democratic republic is gone. It's been snuffed out by a tiny club of big money donors, only about 600 people out of our population of 330 million. They've empowered themselves to choose candidates, control the public debate, and bend public policy to their selfish interests. Both major political parties are complicit in this kleptocratic transformation, Republicans by aggressively pushing it, and Democrats by passively acquiescing to it. While Barack Obama has done nothing to stop this money perversion of democracy, he's at least made noise about making the thieves disclose their theft. But noise is not action, and the GOP's enablers of the thievery have even moved to kill Obama's modest disclosure ideas. In June, for example, House Republicans quietly voted to prohibit the SEC, the shareholders' watchdog, from requiring CEOs to tell the corporate owners how much of their money is being spent on particular political candidates. Another GOP backroom proviso would keep the IRS from disclosing the names of corporate tax law manipulators that use so-called social welfare groups to funnel money anonymously into partisan political campaigns. Also, a third Republican hide-and-seek provision would allow corporations that get billions of dollars in taxpayer funds to avoid telling us the names of lawmakers they're showering with campaign cash. This is Jim Hightower saying, the torrent of secret corporate money in our elections is hosing our democratic ideals and possibilities, blasting the people out of the process, and imposing big money governance over America.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From Boston, Massachusetts, this is Your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. The United Nations Security Council has chosen the language for a resolution endorsing this week's Iranian nuclear deal, and a vote on that resolution is scheduled for this coming Monday at 9 a.m. The decision to expedite the vote has prompted strong criticism from U.S. lawmakers who want to debate the deal for 60 days before any UN action. The lead U.S. negotiator in the nuclear deal, Wendy Sherman, wasn't sympathetic to those concerns, telling reporters Thursday that since the deal was drafted by the permanent 5 members of the Security Council with an eye toward quick UN approval, it would be unrealistic to ask them to wait for national approval. No word yet on whether any heads of state or foreign ministers will attend Monday's vote. And Friday will mark 1 year since the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 in eastern Ukraine, and disturbing new footage has emerged this week showing Russian rebel forces sifting through the debris of the aircraft shortly after it crashed. The video supports the theory that rebels believed they had downed a Ukrainian airliner before realizing that they'd actually hit another aircraft after finding luggage tags belonging to Australian tourists. There are efforts afoot to pass a UN Security Council resolution establishing an international tribunal to investigate the crash, and a draft text of such a resolution references that sanctions could be levied against those found responsible. But securing approval for such a move could be difficult. In a phone call with Dutch Foreign Minister Mark Rutte today, Russian President Vladimir Putin condemned the, quote, prematureness and counterproductivity, end quote, of debating the creation of any such tribunal, while investigations into the incident are still ongoing. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13. Would you dive 14 feet deep in the...
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Rebels are we, so heavy our hearts shall always be. No ball or chain, no prison shall keep rid of rebels of the sacred heart. I said no ball or chain, no prison shall keep rid of rebels of the sacred heart.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So a new big PAC evidently hath been formed, and you know I gotta tell you I love a lot of the right-wing PACs. You know, Vision for America and America of Tomorrow and blah blah blah. And we love dogs and puppies and mom and apple pie and you know all of that stuff. Well, this guy, a guy who considers himself a public interest attorney and also a guy who volunteered once for Gary Hart, he has filed paperwork to form the super PAC called Billionaires for Bernie. Yeah, he believes that the billionaires can fund Bernie because Bernie's got the right ideas for business. It's a good thing. Now he's not he's not someone like me who thinks the money in politics is corrosive. In fact, he's all in support of Citizens United. Thinks it's a great idea because he believes, and I've heard this argument before, that the founding fathers they pledged their fortunes to the founding of the country, and we should let the well-heeled of our day, we should let them risk their fortunes as well. And that's a nice kind of rewrite of history and kind of a nice thought, not so much reality. Understand, everyone involved, all of not just their fortunes were at place, their lives were at stake. They were going to not just have all of their things taken from them, they would have been executed for treason. Something I think we need to have a conversation around when you look at the Confederacy and that big blue X, something that we've never talked about in this country. But that was an act of treason. Had it gone south, had the American Revolution gone south, all of those people who signed the document, and they knew it when they signed it, they would have been hung. In fact, there's a famous story of one of a real big guy and a real small guy saying, and the big guy going to the little guy going, the good thing is I'll go right away. You'll be there, struggling on the rope, because he knew once that rope goes, he would be done. This isn't what we're talking about with today's wealth class. No one's talking about hanging them. They're just talking about a little bit of their fortune to get their puppet candidate, so they get as much as they can possibly have. That's a problem for me. But anyway, this attorney, I guess his name is Joe Jacobson. Eric Jacobson, a Los Angeles attorney. He's filed Billionaires for Bernie. The only problem is that, as I understand it, and as the articles that I've read have pointed out aptly, it's illegal for a super PAC to have the candidate's name in the PAC. And I knew that. You don't need to have the guy who finished last in his law school telling you that. And as I tweeted out earlier when this story came up, someone has to finish last in their law school, and we usually call them Your Honor. Evidently, this guy didn't get the judge job. Just kind of makes you wonder. But the thing that gets me is I look at this PAC setup. Bernie would be absolutely completely against it because he's not looking for the billionaire support. He's not looking to make things as I've heard him say, as I've had him tell me, and as I've read, he's talking about income inequality. He's talking about how do we rebuild that middle class? How do we push back on where we've been going the last 50 years? I saw this statistic the other day that in 81% of the counties in this country, the median income is less than $52,000 a year, which is less than it was 15 years ago. In 15 years, we've seen wages go backwards. At a time when the economy has grown by 83%, at a time when corporate profits have more than doubled, at a time when productivity has more than doubled, wages have actually gone backwards. And you stop and you think about this for a minute. Why is that? Why is it that Wall Street gives out more in bonuses than minimum wage workers make in an entire year, not just once, but twice the amount? Think about how obnoxious that is for a second. That the gamblers on Wall Street, they put in their pocket at Christmas time with their Christmas bonus twice as much as the minimum wage workers in this entire country make in an entire year. Let that sink in for a second. An entire years of work behind the fast food counter, cleaning up at nursing homes, working at fast food joints, working at retail places, an entire year of work is not worth half of what the Wall Street gamblers put in their pockets just in bonuses. If that doesn't outrage you, if that doesn't tick you off, I really don't know. Don't know. Because I guarantee most of us are in that 81% that have seen our income slide backwards. Amazing, amazing stuff. I'm going to take a quick break right back after this. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go. Wherever you're going, as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
People are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A criminal probe into Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker's 2012 recall campaign's coordination with right-wing groups was stopped Thursday by the conservative-dominated Wisconsin Supreme Court. A group of prosecutors, including Republican prosecutors, had been investigating possible illegal coordination between Scott Walker's campaign and the conservative organizations. An aggressive legal attack from one of those groups, the Wisconsin Club for Growth, sought to stop the criminal probe, and Wisconsin's High Court did step in and stop the criminal probe for those groups. Some of the Wisconsin Supreme Court justices refused to recuse themselves from this case, even though they received millions of dollars in campaign funds from these right-wing groups. The Wisconsin Supreme Court ordered the criminal probe against Walker stopped and all evidence gathered in the investigation permanently destroyed. Francis Schmitz, the lead prosecutor in the investigation against Walker's campaign, says one or more of the justices should not have heard this case because the right-wing groups that were being investigated had spent millions of dollars helping elect those Supreme Court justices. The U.S. Labor Department this week issued a clarification on classifying workers as independent contractors or employees. The Labor Department issued a 15-page memo clarifying how workers are to be classified under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Labor Secretary Thomas Perez says misclassification of workers is a major issue. He says when workers are misclassified, they miss out on overtime pay and benefits like unemployment insurance and workers' comp. Perez says it also lets companies avoid state and federal taxes that support employee benefits. Chicago home care and child care workers are protesting state budget cuts they say are inflicting pain on working families statewide. They're demanding that Governor Bruce Rauner rescind tax breaks for big corporations and renegotiate toxic swap and other predatory bank deals to generate more revenue. The workers and their community allies want the governor to work with state lawmakers for a quick resolution to the state budget, and they want the state government to choose revenue over cuts to home care, child care, and other vital services. New Jersey workers lost a state Supreme Court case this week as the court upheld cuts imposed by 3 municipalities back in 2009. Unions had argued that the cities were required to collectively bargain over those cuts, which included mandatory furloughs. During his 5 years in office, Governor Chris Christie has managed to put 3 Republicans on the state high court. They agreed that unpaid furloughs could be imposed without bargaining with the workers. Dissenting from that ruling, though, was Justice Barry Albin. He wrote that the ruling sweeps away nearly 50 years of this court's public sector labor jurisprudence.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by Ulico. For more than 85 years, Ulico has been protecting union workers with quality, affordable insurance while responsibly investing union funds to create jobs and achieve respectable returns. More information is available online at ulico.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
$25 bill now, $30, 30 bill, give me 30, make it 30 bill, mama, $30 bill, give me 30, who'll make a $30 bill? $30 bill now, 35 bill.
Well, it seems like another one of those auction schemes popping up, and I don't know if you've seen this out of Greece, and it appears Greece has been conquered. The new dictate, formally accepted by the Greek government there, appears to be really a surrender. One article I read recently points out that it requires $50 billion or 50 billion euros worth of what they call, quote-unquote, good assets that will be handed off to this privatization fund. And I got to wonder, is this a victory for the privatization crowd? Now someone else owns your water, they own your schools, they own your hospitals. Give us your children, we want your future. Seems very, very, it seems extreme to me. But here to talk a little bit about it, I've asked Mateus Vernengo to come back and give us his thoughts. He's a professor up at Bucknell University. Also, he does some blogging over at Naked Canes. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com if you want to check out some of his outstanding writing on this topic. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, I mean, the way I'm seeing this is a surrender. I mean, this is like conquering a nation. They're basically going to have to give up all their assets and repeal all the laws that they've put in place to try and rein in the banking and do other stuff.
Yeah, it seems that way. It's very difficult not to agree with the notion that this has been a surrendering, that they caved after getting an incredible supportive vote in the referendum slightly more than a week ago. There is obviously an alternative view that suggests that they didn't have any maneuvering room and that they could not opt for anything else than this. But this is certainly not what the Greek people voted in the referendum. It does, as you said, it require them to put 50 billion euros, slightly more than $50 million, so whatever, something like 55, 60 billion dollars in assets of the Greek state as sort of collateral, so to speak. They have to be either privatized or run in a way that would generate surpluses to pay for the aid. I should say the aid is also not much of an aid. It's something that will just prop the system and preclude the complete collapse of the banking system. But there are no new funds, no development funds. So actually they have to hike taxes and they have to reduce spending and undo several of the reforms that they were doing over the last 5 months since Syriza was in power. Things to alleviate the poverty and the worst sort of the people in worse situations. So it's very, very, very harsh. It's punitive. It's well known that it doesn't work, and it has not worked, and so it's very difficult to understand.
Because I look at this, Mateus, and the reality is, and I think as you've said, this austerity just it doesn't work. I mean, you can't slash and burn your way towards prosperity. It just doesn't make any sense. And they've been trying this since the Great Collapse in 2008, and things have really, in looking at it from the outside, things appear to be getting worse.
Yeah, they're getting worse, and they will get worse. That's the. I mean, in all fairness, I think I said it last time in your show, but it's also in one of the pieces I wrote, which it's in the blog too. So the Germans, I shouldn't say just the Germans, but certainly it's the European Commission, so it's the European institutions, but certainly the Germans have more credibility and can steer the European Commission in one way or another more than smaller countries would be able to. The Germans, and the German finance minister, have spoken of eventually as an option of letting Greece out of the system. So in the negotiations, it seemed to me, many people thought that Greece could use the possibility of an exit and a default as a threat to get something out of this bargain.
Right.
And it seems that the actual threat was the Germans saying, if you don't do exactly what we want, we're going to throw you out. And remember, the numbers are not clear because the referendum wasn't explicitly on remaining within the euro. But it's well known that still the majority of Greeks want to remain within the euro and the European Union.
Well, let me ask you this,
look
Mateus.
increasingly difficult to sustain.
Right. Let me ask you this, though. Because I don't think a lot of us understand the whole creation of the Eurozone and really what it was meant to do. When it first came up, I thought it was kind of the European countries doing what the United States did and pulling everybody together into kind of one big, giant economic treaty, and we're going to be one powerhouse, and we're all into this together kind of thing. That's what I thought it was. And I guess I'm wrong. This wasn't what it was meant to be. It wasn't meant to be one country trying to unite them. This was a bunch of different countries who had some economic things that they were doing, but throwing one out could possibly happen. I mean, we can't throw Alabama out of the United States, but they can throw Greece out of the Eurozone, right?
Well, formally, as far as I understand, there's no formal way of throwing them either. Certainly not out of the currency. I don't think that there is. There might be. I'm not sure about this, about the European Union, but I don't think that there are formal mechanisms to be thrown out of the euro. Although it was put on the table. So the finance minister in Germany this week said that he preferred, before the German vote, today Germany's parliament voted, and so this package has been approved in Germany. It was approved earlier in Greece with the support of only 2/3 of the, I should say, of Syriza, the party, in power, and with the support of the traditional parties, in the case of Greece. And so they did openly, suggest the idea of expelling Greece. And so, although there are no mechanisms, that was seemed to be on the table. I think the question is important. What was the meaning of the European Union? And I think that there are two different views on this, and both are correct, but they refer to different periods, and that generates a lot of confusion. The old European Union project, it's a project that dates from the 50s, and started with the European Coal and Steel Community and the Treaty of Rome in the late 50s. And that project was a progressive project. It was a project built around the idea of exactly what you suggested, slowly working into something that looked more like a federal European Union, similar to the U.S., and that it would sort of prop and help create a broad market in which in each country they still have a very generous welfare system. And all of the lessons of the interwar period of the Great Depression were still very fresh. And the U.S. supported this, to some extent pragmatically, because the U.S. was afraid of the Soviet threat, and so supporting an European, even if lefty, progressive sort of European project was seen as a good thing. But the euro is something that it's considerably more recent. It's a project of somewhere in the 80s, and eventually coalesced in something called the Treaty of Maastricht in 1993, now memory fails me, which was the idea of the common currency. So this common currency came after the collapse of the Soviet Union, after the Reagan and Thatcher revolution, conservative revolution, and in many respects was a considerably narrower and more, I would say, neoliberal project.
Right.
So the concerns weren't necessarily concerns with maintaining broad social policies around Europe. They were concerned with opening up markets for businesses and guaranteeing certain minimum standards of the rule of law and contracts for those big businesses and corporations. I always think of the following thing as a sort of an alternative to this is the equivalent of thinking of the sort of policies, the type of integration. It's the sort of policies that the U.S. has pursued when trying to integrate with Latin America, and the policies, if you think of the last 30 years or so, they have been free trade agreements to help corporations that have hurt both workers in Latin America and in the U.S. So you can think of this version of the European project, the Euro version, is European equivalent to these free trade agreements that the U.S. has been signing, with a considerably stronger, side on the monetary issues, no doubt, but essentially in that sort of political spectrum. So it's a right-wing, pro-corporation sort of agreement.
It's basically supply-side voodoo Reaganomics on steroid on a national level, then.
Exactly. Something along those lines.
Because I look at Greece and I gotta wonder, because to me I look at it and that's the conservative playbook right there. We're going to run them in the debt. We're going to create a crisis, and then we're going to steal all their stuff. and we're going to privatize everything, and then do away with social programs. There'll be no more regulations, no more laws. It'll be the Wild West, and that's what conservative billionaires like. Hooray for me, and screw the rest of you.
Exactly. Along those lines, and when you think of, for example, the example used with Greece is always Argentina, because there are some similarities. And certainly in Argentina, that happened too. In the 90s, and a good chunk of Latin America, I should say, privatization of all national assets. So the last ditch in order of continue to pay international markets is to sell for nothing your national assets. So I think at this point there is good reason for the Greek people to go to the streets and try to preclude this agreement to actually take effect, even if it leads to being expelled. I think that at the end of the day, this imposes severe constraints, the ability of the Greek government to decide if they're going to. So if the government wants to have some sort of social program, something tiny, small, to help people, not starve to death, they have to get approval from the European Commission institutions. So the government in Greece is effectively intervened by the European institutions. So this is recolonization. It's colonization, I should say. Greece is not a colony.
Yeah.
But it's colonization of Greece. It's unheard of. They lost sovereignty, and so it's unprecedented, I would say. So this didn't happen even in Argentina. I should say it was floated. So conservative economists, I remember when Argentina defaulted in 2002, Rudiger Dornbusch, a very conservative economist professor at MIT, he did write in the Financial Times that Argentina should not be allowed to manage its own policy. So it's not unprecedented that people think this should happen, but it's incredible if actually it goes through. The incredible thing is if it goes through, it's also going through with a left-of-center party. So Syriza is for, I should say 1/3 of the Syriza members of parliament voted against this. So the party is already split, significantly split, and Left Platform will very likely become an independent party with some other left of center.
So is there a possibility that the people do rise up, take to the streets, and undo this? And then what's the worst possible thing can happen? They're already bankrupt just about. They would still maintain their assets if there are $50 billion worth of good assets. Couldn't they just collateralize them anyway? I mean, it just seems to me that you're doing what they're taking more than they're getting, because I see a collapse coming anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the situation on the ground. I've talked with people. I know that it's very likely that there'll be an election, and so it's very likely that if Syriza stays in power, it's with the help of traditional parties, and so with people that have opposing views to what they have held so far, people that voted for the yes in the previous referendum. So there is some hope that the people organized and in an election could vote for, against this. However, and as you said, so what will be the price? So even, and don't get me wrong, if you read what I have been writing, I do not think that just getting out of Europe per se is a solution.
Right.
But certainly it's clear that this thing, staying in under these conditions, under an European project that it's incapable of learning from its own mistakes, that there is no way out for the Greek people. So there are things that they could do. I mean, if they get out, that besides just retaining their
sovereignty,
their assets, they can. There's a series of things that they can do, at least to help those that are in need. There are lots of programs. Think of the New Deal in the U.S., in which at the beginning you have all of these work programs, the Works Progress Administration and stuff like that, that they don't pay huge amounts of money. The work that it's being done is not the most productive work in the world. You're fixing, roads and stuff like that, but it gives purpose to people, and they get them working again and active, and starts to get the economy going. So Greece at this point is at a juncture in which there is always this question. Thinking in terms of U.S., these things that unions have, that you have to decide whether you work within the Democratic Party, which has moved a lot to the right, or you try to work outside the party with, independent candidates.
Yeah, you look at Hillary or Bernie.
Institutions. And so here you have the same dilemma, that you can still try to work within the European Union and try to modify it, but at some point you have to. I don't think U.S. is in such, So there is still a lot of good stuff within the Democratic Party. But you see somebody like Bernie Sanders, he was outside and now he's running inside. But there are these dilemmas. Where's the right place to do? So in Greece, I think the balance is starting to move in the direction of inside the European Union is unworkable. At least inside the euro, not necessarily the European Union. Remember that these are two different things. One thing is to remain within the euro, another thing is the European Union. So they remain in the European Union even if they leave the euro. And so, at least within the euro, it seems that it's increasingly impossible to do anything to shift the balance of the burden. I mean, the burden, there'll be a burden on anything they do, a burden of, of recession and a crisis in hand. Getting out of the euro would also lead to problems. But at least they'll have the instruments to start moving in a different direction.
Yeah.
So I think it's increasingly moving in that direction.
What should we be looking forward in the next couple of weeks? Because this is really fast moving. What should we be looking for in the next couple of weeks?
So the question is whether they're going to call elections and how fast that will happen, and how the political coalitions will reorganize within Greece. I think that's what we should look at and see what will happen there. It's at this point incredibly unlikely that any support from outside, left of center people outside of Europe, groups like Podemos in Spain, and there are groups in Italy also, that would have any impact on policies in the European Union. So forget what happens in the rest of Europe. Europe has basically sided with the very, very stringent policies and more of what they've done over the last 6 years. So the chances of having something different will come from within Greece and from how the left reorganizes there. I should say, I've been told that Golden Dawn and right-wing parties are less strong than they used to be even a few years back. But that's also something we should be concerned with. It's always worth remembering that Golden Dawn has been against, they voted for the no, they have been against Europe, the extreme right all around Europe. So in England too, UKIP and the National Front in France, all of these parties of the fascist, essentially, they are for they're against European institutions, and
yeah, they're hyper nationalists.
They have been very consistent, and they will try to also gain space in this environment, and they might gain some space. So Europe it's almost incredible to say this, but Europe has been toying with the possibility of bringing back two-power fascist parties, particularly because they are imposing these harsh policies on the peripheral countries.
Wow. Well, it'll be interesting to see where this goes, and we'd love to have you come back and talk with us as more develops there. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Great talking with you, Mateus. Mateus Vernengo is a professor at Bucknell, also does some great blogging over at Naked Canes. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Mateus's name, take you right to their website. You can read the great stuff there. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Brother firefighters, my friend, and the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we bear.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. A crew of mostly black soldiers were loading munitions onto ships at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine in California, northeast of Oakland. 320 soldiers were killed by a munitions explosion that wounded another 390 people. Troops were segregated. Black enlisted men were often given the worst and most dangerous non-combat jobs. All of the munition loaders at Port Chicago were African American. Every officer was white. The sailors were not given proper training in the loading of ammunition. The idea of loading munitions scared the soldiers. The officers lied and said the job was safe and that the weapons could not explode. They were wrong. The explosion caused a giant fireball that killed everyone on the ship and on the pier. The explosion could be heard 200 miles away. Of the 320 people killed, 202 were black. Only 51 bodies could be identified. Ordinarily, soldiers traumatized by the death of fellow soldiers were given 30 days leave. None of the black soldiers, not even those who were hospitalized, got leave. All of the white officers did. Surviving soldiers refused to load munitions. For that, they were arrested. 40 were charged with mutiny. The rest of the soldiers were also punished. They were sent to the Pacific Theater, forced to do menial duty. Many received bad conduct discharges at the end of the war, making them ineligible for military benefits. Those charged with mutiny were sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. When World War II ended, the imprisoned soldiers' sentences were reduced to 2 years. And in 1999, President Bill Clinton pardoned one of the survivors, 79-year-old Freddie Meeks. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing a slew full of flags of the Confederate States of America and the one we still argue about today. After the First Battle of Manassas, Southern General P.G.T. Beauregard resolved to change the Confederate flag due to the confusion of both friendly and enemy troops during the battle. Dedicated to the change, he asked his military aide for assistance. His aide? Well, it was one William Miles, former chairman of the Flag Committee, who already had a flag ready to go. Upon approval of the general, Miles requested from the existing Flag Committee that his battle flag be adopted as the second Confederate flag. It was formally rejected, but the flag that Miles had designed and favored from the beginning eventually became the official battle flag and ultimately the most popular flag of the Confederacy, the one we're fighting about 150 years later. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. You know, I look at what's going on in Greece, and look, it's a giant privatization scheme. It's a giant rip-off of public assets. It just is what it is. When you're saying we want 50-plus billion euros worth of your quote-unquote good assets, and we'll decide what the good assets are, that's just saying we want the good stuff, none of that crap you've been saving. We want the good stuff, like your water and your air and your food. That's what we want. It's another one of those scenarios where you look at they've created this massive crisis, and they're capitalizing on it. And I've heard people say, well, that just happened over there. It's going on right here. And, I just saw this story about Coatesville, Pennsylvania. Anybody know where Coatesville is? It's just outside of Philadelphia, former steel town, full of, people who are struggling, man. When the steel mill left town, big trouble. They have a per capita income, and this blows my mind, a per capita income of $14,079 per resident. Now, they're situated right there in a very wealthy county of Chester County. And their population's been declining because guess what? No jobs. And you look at what went on there. The jobs left. The need for public services were still there. The need to invest in the local economy still there. So what happened? Well, the people who run Coatesville said, hey, we can sell off our public water utility. We can get a big cash infusion that'll help us do some urban redevelopment. We can have a renaissance. And you'll have this private company come in and invest in the water. They'll maintain the system that they have. They'll modernize. They'll repair everything. Everything will be wonderful. We'll get water, and it will be wonderful. Only problem is over the last 5 years, the cost has doubled. Last 5 years, costs doubled for water. And right now what they're saying is, well, you're going to pay rates, even though $14,000 a year, you're going to pay rates right there with the folks who live in San Francisco. And it's because you've got these big funders. The Carlyle Group is part of this. These big national, global investors who are saying, we're going to bring in a little bit of money, and we're going to buy up your stuff. And you know what's great about these privatization schemes from the hedge fund part of it? What they do is they come in, they give you your one-time infusion of cash, like for your liquor stores or for your parking authority or for your lottery or for whatever, your prisons, eventually your schools, all of that. We're going to give you the one-time because it's going to help you pay your bills. And if you can just get past the next month, you'll be okay, right? Because that's how we like to think. So you've sold off your asset. They're going to take it over, and they're going to run it right into the ground. Because, one, they want all their money back, and they want it now. And two, it's not about providing you with a service. It's about making money off of you. It has nothing to do with water into your tap. It has everything with cash into their pockets. And then once you get the asset back, because these leases generally come with a 75 years or whatever, you got to give it back. It's not worth getting back because they've sucked every bit of profit out of it. And oh, by the way, they didn't actually take out a loan for it. They didn't actually give you anything for it. What they did is they bought your asset, they took it from you, gave you this infusion of cash, and then they ran up huge debt against it to go and leverage it to go buy other things. They're never out. They never lose. You know who loses? You do. I do. The consumers always lose. But yet somehow we've got it in our heads that these privatization schemes are just wonderful. They're good. Gonna give us clean water. And broken pipes. I was listening to a thing the other day. American Water. We bring you clean water for a penny a gallon. Yet you go back 10 years. What was it? It was about a tenth of a penny a gallon. Mission accomplished. Profits through the roof. And who's duped? Well, it's you and me, right? Quick break. Right back.
The The 19th century saw regular work weeks of 70 hours or more. Many attempts were made to get legislatures across the country to pass maximum hour laws limiting the number of hours an employee could be compelled to labor. The first union victory in capping work hours was won by the building trades in 1840. They won a 60-hour week. In 1874, the state of Massachusetts became the first to pass a law mandating a maximum hours for women. Other states followed as union activists around the country fought to pass laws to protect workers. Their work stalled in 1905 when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the New York Bake Shop Act unconstitutional, citing a sacred bond between master and employee and the liberty of contract. With this decision, the Lochner era, named after bakery owner Joseph Lochner, who had been cited, tried, and convicted of working employees beyond the 60-hour limit, began. This single decision opened the floodgates, allowing attacks on child labor laws, minimum wage laws, as well as maximum hour laws by corporate and anti-union interests. Only after President Franklin Delano Roosevelt threatened to enlarge the United States Supreme Court from 9 to 13 did the court do an about-face with regard to liberty of contract and what has been called a switch in time to save 9, ruling in West Coast Hotel versus Parrish that Elsie Parrish was indeed entitled to the state of Washington's minimum wage, regardless of what conditions she agreed to, marking the end of the Lochner era. FDR's New Deal policies helped workers reclaim lost ground in their fight for the American dream. The proposal and passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act, federally restricting weekly hours, mandating overtime pay, setting a minimum wage, and restricting the exploitative use of child labor was an essential step forward for workers, families, and communities. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center of IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
Just when you thought it was safe, those crazy Republicans are at it again. It's time for the Rick Smith Show's Conservative Alerts.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Big news today breaking across the inner tubes. Former Representative Michael Grimm sentenced to 8 months in prison for federal tax evasion. And even the whole, I was a Marine, be easy, we're taught not to fail, that didn't help him stay out of prison. Evidently, there was a 2-hour-long sentencing hearing where, he said, I'm taught not to fail. And I'm not quite sure what that's got to do with tax evasion, but it is what it is. I'm shocked. I'm surprised, but I think he deserved what he got. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about the week that has been, all of the craziness, the insanity, the fun. I'm loving this 2016 presidential primary. I've asked Terrence Heath, he's an online producer over at the Campaign for America's Future, ourfuture.org, the website. Terrence, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you think? Michael Grimm behind bars, good thing, bad thing?
Well, it was bound to happen sooner or later. If you remember all of the different stories about how he carried on even before his career in Congress, threatening reporters and just basically acting like a thug in general, even before he was in Congress. It couldn't, well, I would say it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, but it was bound to happen sooner or later.
Yeah, well, and maybe prison will help rehabilitate him. Maybe he will go and see the light. Although that's really not what our prison system's for.
No.
Maybe he'll just come back as a worse thug.
I was going to say he might just get worse.
All right, let's take a look at the week that was. I know you've been following the big sting, the big Planned Parenthood thing. Mind-blowing to me how easily duped we, the public, are by crafty editing.
It's amazing, and what's amazing is that this organization is known for deceptively edited videos, and they even released the full transcript and the unedited video. And I literally thought, gee, did nobody bother to look?
No.
Because there's some obvious things there, like, the timestamps that jump 8 minutes out of nowhere. And it's basically just creating their own reality.
And what is that reality? That the headlines I saw is Planned Parenthood's selling baby parts.
Right.
But you go, really?
Right, and in reality, nobody's selling anything. It's the same perfectly legal donation by consent practice that's been going on for a long time. So it's not anything new. It's not.
That you can't even sell. I mean, the other part of it is you can't. It's illegal. You can't sell it.
Right, it's illegal to sell, and that was that was made clear in the unedited videotape. So my feeling is that this is just it's an Acorn-esque move to attack Planned Parenthood using the same strategies and the same tactics.
But here's the question, Terrence. In looking at this, does honesty, does truthfulness, does any of that stuff matter to the ideologues who would look at that James O'Keefe video about Acorn? Because I still have people saying, the Acorn, they cheated everyone.
And
does it matter to anyone?
It's not. I mean, it takes more. It takes more time to actually look beyond that than I think a lot of people are willing to put into it. Given the headlines over the Planned Parenthood thing, it took me about 3 minutes to suss out the details and find the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And still, you have people in the media, lots of them on Fox News, pounding the line about Planned Parenthood selling fetus parts, and it's to the people on that side of the argument on the right. I don't think that the truth matters so much as it comes down to the ends versus the means.
Right.
And their end is they want to shut down Planned Parenthood and any organizations like it by any means necessary, and they don't mind lying if that's what it takes to do it.
And as I understand, here in Pennsylvania, Mike Turzai, the Speaker of the House, and a number of the other GOP members in our General Assembly have just called for Planned Parenthood in Pennsylvania to be shut down. So it's just not media flacks that are calling for this. It's these idiot ideologue politicians as well.
Yeah, and it's their opportunity. They're using it as an opportunity to jump on this. This kind of misinformation campaign that all it requires is for people to read a headline, watch 2 or 3 minutes of a video, and come to a conclusion. And once they've got that idea across and got that language out there, it's like the old saying that a lie can go around the world while the truth is still putting on its pants. And that's what's unfolding in this case. I don't know exactly how it's going to end. I don't think that it'll end necessarily the same way for Planned Parenthood that it did for Acorn. But this is something that we're going to see more of, and it's I can't even come up with words.
Dishonest. I mean, it's just blatantly, flat out dishonest. It's what we used to call when I was a kid a lie.
Exactly.
And we need to get back to that language. You need to call a liar, and you need to anyone who agrees with it. You go, you're a liar too. And we need to rid ourselves of these folks.
Right. And it's an underhanded tactic that they're going to use, and I think knowingly in terms of the legislators and lawmakers that are jumping on this opportunistically. It's something they're going to use to whip up outrage and panic, whether it's based on anything real or not.
Well, and raise money. I mean, understand what this is really about. At the end of the day, it's about raising the money. They know Planned Parenthood's not going to go anywhere, but they can use it to their idiot base who goes, yeah, we want to do away with abortion.
Yeah.
And it's about the cash. And sadly, that's what it all comes down to.
Yeah. I mean, they will definitely raise money off of it.
All right, let's find out what else is going on in the week. It's been an interesting week for Donald Trump. He had a little back and forth with Rick Perry over the border. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm thrilled Trump is in this. I think it can only make the Republican Party weaker.
If I were a Republican, I would be having a migraine a day right about now, especially with Trump getting more popular with Republican voters. Now, you and I know that at the end of the day, Donald Trump there's no way that he's going to be the Republican nominee, but what he does is shine a big spotlight on the kind of ugliness that Republicans have spent years nurturing among their base. They remind me, like I said in my post today, they remind me of Dr. Frankenstein chasing the monster that he created across the tundra, trying to stop his own creation. And in a sense, the Republicans created Donald Trump because they primed their base on this kind of red meat that he's throwing out.
Yep.
And he's just throwing out a lot bloodier red meat than they are. It's not at all finesse. It's bald-faced xenophobia, and the Republican base is eating it up. So he's managing to trash his own brand and the Republican brand at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing that gets me is, you're right. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to say, well, Donald Trump's out there, he's telling the truth. He's telling the way it is. And I'm going, well, maybe your twisted version of the truth, but it's not reality. And honestly, is this what we want as a leader in the free world? Do we want a bully? Do we want a narcissist? Do we want this guy with the flapping hair? Is this what we want? And sadly, some of my Republican friends are like, yeah, we need that bully.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's one of the ways that the Republican Party, I think, is going to further isolate itself, because they've gotten to a point now where they can't stop this from happening. Like I said in my post, the longer he stays in the race, the more he resembles a carnival barker, and the more the Republican primary resembles a three-ring circus.
Yeah.
And this guy is going to be, I guarantee you, on stage, front and center for the first Republican presidential debate.
I know, and that is going to be just glorious.
I'm popping extra popcorn because it's gonna be a circus. It's going to be ludicrous, and there will be candidates. There are sitting governors that are so low in the polls that they won't make the cut.
That's amazing to me.
For the Republican debate, but a reality TV star.
And a guy who's filed bankruptcy numerous times and built the federal government and the taxpayers out of millions and millions of dollars. He's the guy at the top of the polls. And it just shows me that we've really fallen down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. It's we've gone through the looking glass, and I don't know where it goes from here. But there's an element of mass delusion in a way, because you know that Trump believes his own press.
Of course he does.
When he says, "Oh, Hillary Clinton is losing sleep at night at the thought of debating me," and I'm going to get more Latino votes than anyone, he really believes that. And I think that at least a segment of the Republican base believes or wants to believe the same thing, because it reassures them that the world really hasn't changed as much as it has.
Right.
In 2012, Mitt Romney was kind of the restoration candidate. That if he won the election, that would put the right people back in charge and would reassure everyone that Barack Obama's election was a fluke. But it didn't work out that way. And I think Donald Trump, in a sense, is kind of the restoration candidate for this election in terms of putting this GOP base that sees themselves culturally and economically no longer at the center of what it means to be an American.
That's a good point. This afternoon I was just having this conversation about, of the Republican field, of this entire clown bus, who is, the least destructive in my view. And I can't. I go, as much as I hate to say it, as far as the Republican Party seems to have gone off the rails, Rick Santorum seems the most reasonable. Now think about that for a second. The most reasonable seems the guy who just a couple years ago we were saying was a completely insaniac.
Yeah, but you remember that he was his billionaire sugar daddy Foster Fried kept him in the race in 2012 far longer than he would have been otherwise.
Yes, and Foster Fried, the guy who said, well, we got to teach the gals, give her aspirins so she can put it between her knees to prevent pregnancy.
Right. I mean, he single-handedly kept Santorum in the race just the same way that Adelson kept Gingrich in the race, and Romney couldn't get rid of them as fast as he would have before. And so, Santorum doesn't seem to have the same mojo behind him now, but Donald Trump has kind of taken that title.
Let me ask you this: Do you really think Trump has a chance? I mean, he's got a lot of money, but the real billionaires, do you think that they don't want one of their own in that spot? Because I would think there's some narcissism there going, if any of us should be in there, it should be me. All of them looking at the mirror, talking to themselves. Because I think they just want a puppet. I don't know that they want one of their own actually sitting in that seat.
Also because one of the things that Trump has said is that he will spend what it takes. And whatever his net worth is, it's at least in the double digits of billions. And he could keep himself, depending on how much he's willing to spend, keep himself in the primaries through the end, because we're talking about $50 to $60 million.
Right, a drop in a bucket of wealth, from what I understand.
What makes him, what it is about him that I think makes the other billionaires, the bigger billionaires, nervous, is that if one of their candidates, and I'm using the possessive intentionally, were behaving this way, all they would have to do is yank funding, and that campaign would fold faster than you could blink.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump doesn't have that. There's no green leash that someone can yank on him. If he uses his own money to stay in the race, then he can say whatever the hell he wants for as long as he wants.
And I got to tell you, I'm thrilled that he is. Let's bang through a couple other quick craziness moments.
All right.
I see TLC has 19 and canceled.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a huge surprise, considering that this whole thing is still unfolding, and I don't think that all of what will be revealed has come close to coming out yet. There's other lawsuits pending. This is kind of like the right wing's Bill Cosby case. There's just every time you turn around, there's something new coming out. There's a lawsuit now that may expose a lot more things. And so TLC is cutting its losses, basically.
As they should.
And what's interesting is that I saw this article about the series being canceled, but I haven't heard a lot of uproar about it on the right. They have moved on. I mean, Fox News did a whole interview exclusive with the Duggar family, and basically just gave them free reign to send their talking points out to the world, and it backfired on them. It made them look even worse, both Fox and the Duggars. So.
Yeah, what's amazing to me is how the Christian right easily excommunicates their fallen, and I always think back to Pastor Ted Haggard, who was the head guy pushing the anti-gay stuff, and you later find him sniffing crack off the backside of a male hooker. They send him to the door rather quickly, and I see this being the same way.
And he got a lot less of a defense than Josh Duggar has, and I've said before, if Josh Duggar had been molesting little boys instead of little girls, he would have disappeared a lot sooner.
Yeah, they'd be homeless by now. And finally,
there would be there would have been shut down.
Instantly. They'd all be homeless by now, and no one would hire them. And finally, I see talk show host Steve Doocy longed for the good old days where people were too poor to be gay. Really? Does that have something to do with income?
that was kind of laughable to me. It's one of those things that this is a guy who doesn't know anything history because I know there were gay people around back in the good old days too. What made the good old days good for people like Steve Doocy was that was the age when father knew best and everyone else knew their place, which was blacks in the back of the bus, women in the kitchen, and gays in the closet. Being too poor had very little to do with it.
Yeah, I just thought it was very bizarre. Anyway, if you want to check out Terrence's Wingnut Weekend Review, you can go to ourfuture.org, the website, or you can just go to thericksmithshow.com, click on Terrence Heath's name, take you right there. Terrence, you guys do great work over there, and I appreciate you taking a little bit of time for us.
Thank you for having me.
Always great, Terrence Heath. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
While the poor man pays the band, oh, they're killing me, for killing me. Lord have mercy on the working man.
Proudly blue in an ocean of red. Rick Smith.
From Boston, Massachusetts, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. The United Nations Security Council has chosen the language for a resolution endorsing this week's Iranian nuclear deal, and a vote on that resolution is scheduled for this coming Monday at 9 a.m. The decision to expedite the vote has prompted strong criticism from U.S. lawmakers who want to debate the deal for 60 days before any UN action. The lead U.S. negotiator in the nuclear deal, Wendy Sherman, wasn't sympathetic to those concerns, telling reporters Thursday that since the deal was drafted by the permanent 5 members of the Security Council with an eye toward quick UN approval, it would be unrealistic to ask them to wait for national approval. No word yet on whether any heads of state or foreign ministers will attend Monday's vote. And Friday will mark 1 year since the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 in eastern Ukraine. And disturbing new footage has emerged this week showing Russian rebel forces sifting through the debris of the aircraft shortly after it crashed. The video supports the theory that rebels believed they had downed a Ukrainian airliner before realizing that they'd actually hit another aircraft after finding luggage tags belonging to Australian tourists. There are efforts afoot to pass a UN Security Council resolution establishing an international tribunal to investigate the crash. And a draft text of such a resolution references that sanctions could be levied against those found responsible. But securing approval for such a move could be difficult. In a phone call with Dutch Foreign Minister Mark Rutte today, Russian President Vladimir Putin condemned the, quote, prematureness and counterproductivity, end quote, of debating the creation of any such tribunal, while investigations into the incident are still ongoing. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm breaking the rocks in the hot sun. I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Sad times this week. A friend passed away, and someone that when I began doing this program in Harrisburg, kind of took me under his wing and talked a lot about the history of what was going on in Harrisburg, and gave me a lot of his personal experiences over the years. And it's sad to see the passing of Russ Keating, who I just thought was a great guy. He was a former communications director for AFSCME Council 13. He also worked with the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO as one of their lobby folks. Just a great all-around guy. One of those people who always took time for folks, and he will be missed. It's sad. Just one of those things that as you get older and you kind of look back at things you've done. You kind of go, was it worth the time I spent? And I look at the passing of Russ, and this nonsense that's going on here in Harrisburg. And he said, look, he told me, and I remember this, just like he said it yesterday. You keep fighting the same fights over and over again. It's always the same thing. They just put new dressing on it. It's always the same fights. And that's the sad reality of our times. You know, all of this wingnuttery, all of this craziness, this is the same fight that was 50 years, 100 years ago. And all of this time and this energy and all of this stuff that we're wasting on this craziness. You know, you just wonder, and it's times like these that make you kind of sit back and go, you know, is all of this bickering and this partisanship and all this nonsense really worth it? You know, shouldn't we be taking some of this energy and figuring out how do we make things better? I mean, it's just really twisted. And I look at all this nonsense around Scott Wagner. At the end of the day, what exactly is he benefiting from? All of this craziness, all of these attacks on teachers and workers, was it worth it? Or is it just to get his jollies off? I don't know. It's sad. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Also, if you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. A criminal probe into Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker's 2012 recall campaign's coordination with right-wing groups was stopped Thursday by the conservative-dominated Wisconsin Supreme Court. A group of prosecutors, including Republican prosecutors, had been investigating possible illegal coordination between Scott Walker's campaign and the conservative organizations. An aggressive legal attack from one of those groups, the Wisconsin Club for Growth, sought to stop the criminal probe, and Wisconsin's High Court did step in and stop the criminal probe for those groups. Some of the Wisconsin Supreme Court justices refused to recuse themselves from this case, even though they received millions of dollars in campaign funds from these right-wing groups. The Wisconsin Supreme Court ordered the criminal probe against Walker stopped and all evidence gathered in the investigation permanently destroyed. Francis Schmitz, the lead prosecutor in the investigation against Walker's campaign, says one or more of the justices should not have heard this case because the right-wing groups that were being investigated had spent millions of dollars helping elect those Supreme Court justices. The U.S. Labor Department this week issued a clarification on classifying workers as independent contractors or employees. The Labor Department issued a 15-page memo clarifying how workers are to be classified under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Labor Secretary Thomas Perez says misclassification of workers is a major issue. He says when workers are misclassified, they miss out on overtime pay and benefits like unemployment insurance and workers' comp. Perez says it also lets companies avoid state and federal taxes that support employee benefits. Chicago home care and child care workers are protesting state budget cuts they say are inflicting pain on working families statewide. They're demanding that Governor Bruce Rauner rescind tax breaks for big corporations and renegotiate toxic swap and other predatory bank deals to generate more revenue. The workers and their community allies want the governor to work with state lawmakers for a quick resolution to the state budget, and they want the state government to choose revenue over cuts to home care, child care, and other vital services. New Jersey workers lost a state Supreme Court case this week as the court upheld cuts imposed by 3 municipalities back in 2009. Unions had argued that the cities were required to collectively bargain over those cuts, which included mandatory furloughs. During his 5 years in office, Governor Chris Christie has managed to put 3 Republicans on the state high court. They agreed that unpaid furloughs could be imposed without bargaining with the workers. Dissenting from that ruling, though, was Justice Barry Albin. He wrote that the ruling sweeps away nearly 50 years of this court's public sector labor jurisprudence.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by Ulico. For more than 85 years, Ulico has been protecting union workers with quality, affordable insurance while responsibly investing union funds to create jobs and achieve respectable returns. More information is available online at ulico.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Somebody's watching you, you like it. Somebody's watching you, you care.
Well, I got the message earlier in the program that the Scott Wagner cameras, they are down. It's not the chopper. Someone had emailed me, said, it's a shame it's not the chopper that's gone down. No, just the cameras. The cameras that were in the... And look, this is the state senator showing off that he's got toys. I think it's just playing a little show and tell. He's got the chopper. He's got the 2 iPhone 6s. See, look, I got stuff. I got to tell you, it's just bizarre to me, and this guy just kind of bizarre to me. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about that, the budget, pensions, whatever else we get around to. John Newrohr, Communications Director at Keystone Progress. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me again, Rick, as always.
So when I thought it couldn't get any better, you got the state senator flying around in his helicopter saying how wonderful everything down on the ground looks with those schools that are just hemorrhaging money out the windows. That we could get rid of 10% of the teachers and no one missed them. Now, I guess, doing skirt shots, looking for Hello Kitty underwear. What?
It might surprise you to hear me say this, and let me say, by the way, that it has nothing to do with skirt shots. So just let me preface that first before I say what I'm going to say. It might surprise you to hear me say this. I think this is fabulous. I think this is fantastic, and frankly, it upsets me, it pains me to hear that the iPhone 6s are no longer up in front of his office.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, we're talking about a guy who clearly wants to be the Republican kingmaker in Pennsylvania. He wants to be the man. He wants to speak for the party. He wants people to have to come to him to be able to win Republican primaries. And so every single time he does something crazy like this, flies a helicopter over schools and says, look, they don't need any money, says that we could get rid of 10% of teachers and nobody would miss them, or puts the iPhone 6s in front of his office, as a bully, saying he's being bullied. I think it's great. It's sort of the trumpetization of Republican politics here in Pennsylvania.
Good point.
And so you have this radical right-wing ideologue who wants to be in charge and wants to be the man and speak for the party. What does that do for somebody who is a registered Republican here in Pennsylvania? So I will say I think it's great.
I think it's great for another reason. We filed a right to know request because we want the tapes. We want to see who's been coming and going out of his offices. I think that's important too. As you've pointed out, he wants to be the kingmaker. He wants to be the king. He wants to be the guy. So in that case, people have got to come and kiss the ring. I want to see who they were. I mean, you've put it out there. It's now, in my view, it's something that we should know what was going on in that hallway since you've made a big deal about it.
Well, that's totally fair. I know you've talked about this already, but that office is the people's office. I mean, he is able to be there at the pleasure of his constituents and the people of Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
So you absolutely have every right to file a right to know law request and find out who is what's on the tapes, if you will. But I do think, sort of to get back to that point, I think that it's really important for us to recognize that what this does is Republican leadership in a really tough spot. And that's why I love it. Because how are you going to deal with this guy who, frankly, he has the money, he has the resources in a lot of ways to be a kingmaker, maybe not the kingmaker, but we know he's trying to run write-in candidates, for example, for some of the special elections that are coming up. He wants to be the man. How Republican leadership over the long term responds to him is really difficult for them and a critically important thing for us to be watching.
I'm with you. But let me ask you the other side of this, because initially when it happened, my first thought went to, could this be a diversion away from the fact that we still don't have a budget? Could this be, here's something to go focus on over here. Look at the shiny thing over here while we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing over here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it ends up being that in some ways.
So maybe he's not smart enough to do that, but it's what it got.
Right. I mean, that's what I would say. And frankly, from Senator Wagner's perspective, he should be out there using the fact that we don't have the budget to continue to try to hammer, the governor, which he's been doing, and hammer Democrats, which he's been doing, just sort of from a political strategy perspective, that's what he should be talking about. It's a great opportunity for him.
Yeah,
I mean, he's wrong, but it's a great opportunity for him, for sure.
Yeah, this doesn't really help him. But here's the thing that bothers me about this, and this guy wants to be governor. Clearly, I've heard numerous people say that he's seriously considering a gubernatorial run, and it shows me the wanton disregard for policy. If there were cameras to be put in that hallway, it should have been done by the powers to be. It should have been by the Capitol Police or someone who's in charge of that, not just taking some duct tape and planting them somewhere in the hopes of maybe catching someone, which after a month of being in the hallway, if people were knocking on his door or, heaven forbid, the old curmudgeon, get your ball out of my yard, knocking over his sign, in a month, especially around the budget, there should be something on that tape.
Yeah, you wonder, I said this before, and this is sort of a situation where you have the bully in the schoolyard who is claiming that he's being bullied, which is, everybody knows, that's just, total BS. So it certainly, I think, it proves that there's, there's something, there are things in his brain, little wires that should be connecting that aren't quite connecting right. It just doesn't make sense. And so, there's no question that it doesn't surprise anybody who's paying attention to his antics and how he operates that he sees himself in the governor's mansion. That's something that he thinks is totally possible. But again, back to my original point about how I think this is fantastic, it puts the party in Pennsylvania, the Republican Party, in a really tough spot because he has the resources to strong arm into the conversation in much the same way that Donald Trump is doing the same thing during the Republican presidential primary right now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's absolutely accurate, and I also think the paranoid caucus that seems to be developing in the Pennsylvania State Senate should be troublesome for the party. Last week I spoke with State Senator John Eichelberger, my state senator, about his claims that teachers were calling his office and they were talking to him on the street, and that he was being harassed and intimidated by these union goons, and he wasn't going to back down. I just thought, at some point, does this paranoia become apparent to the Republican voter that maybe they've got some serious dysfunctional folks there, that maybe they should use that health insurance we get them to get some treatment?
I like that. No, I think that what's funny is that what he describes to you, what he's talking about, is what it means to be an elected official. That's your job. Your job is not to, make ridiculous statements and be radical and go make enemies and bully people around, and then be able to sit back and only get emails and phone calls and be approached in the street from by people that agree with you. That's the point. That's what a democracy, representative democracy is. You're representing this swath of constituents, and not all of them are going to agree with you. So, that's another instance to me where you're talking about somebody where there's things, wires in the brain that should be touching and they're not quite touching, and that's really kind of scary. I think you're right.
As my daughter said, "Suck it up, Buttercup."
Well, right. Again, that's what it's like to be an elected official. That's your job. And here's the other thing. The irony of it is you probably have elected officials that are dealing with that more now than ever before,
right,
because we have such a polarized country. We have a polarized electorate. And the irony is that it's people like Wagner and Eichelberger who are the ones who are making this country more polarized.
Exactly.
With their with the kinds of bills that they're pushing, with the enemies they're making. They are responsible as anybody else for the increased polarization that they don't seem to be able to deal with the ramifications of.
And as I asked him, I said, it's your radical policies. It's this extremist change that you're pursuing that's going to get people upset. And I think back to Arlen Specter, and I've never been a huge Arlen Specter fan, But I didn't hear Arlen go off about being intimidated or harassed when that crazy Tea Party guy went ballistic in his face. I don't remember Arlen going, "Oh, you're harassing me, stop."
Well, and I think that it when you start to make enemies of people, when you start to make enemies of teachers, for goodness sake, the way that you go about your business is sort of dehumanizing. That you have these enemies that aren't people. You have these enemies that don't have that aren't legitimate, that don't have legitimate opinions and things to say. And so I think, somebody like an Arlen Specter is a good example of somebody who, while he might have disagreed with you, you're still a person and you're still a constituent or a Pennsylvanian or somebody that you have worth, and that and it's worth it for him to listen, even if eventually, in the end, you're still going to disagree. And you have elected officials now, these radical elected officials who don't look at it that way. That if you don't agree with them, you might as well not be a person. You're not worth talking to.
Yeah, and at the end of it, we're really talking about a radical, especially when you're talking about destroying people's pensions and destroying their retirements and radically changing the direction of the Commonwealth and in really doing irreparable damage, in my view.
Yeah, I think that, to go back to your point that you're hearing from people that Scott Wagner wants to be governor, it's one thing to look at the way that the legislative map is drawn right now, and so you have some districts where they're clearly going to be Republican districts for a very long time because of the way they're drawn.
Yeah.
When you start stepping back and saying, okay, how do I win a statewide election? The calculus is so much different.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure that if that's something that Senator Wagner really grasps.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good point. But in the redistricting and the district stuff, I look at my senatorial district here in the state, and you ever seen one of those little kids that on the back of the cars that looks like he's taking a leak on something?
Yes.
That's what mine looks like. It has that kind of that body there. Only I live in the part where the kid's not taking a leak. He's got gas and he blows a little bit out the back end. I'm in the gas cloud in the back end, which I'm going, how exactly did you design this? Looks like this, and then someone blows a huge gas cloud out of the back end. How did I get into the gas cloud?
How did you get into the gas cloud? You're a talk radio host. I mean, you should be used to being in clouds of hot air. But I'm saying, I think that one of the things we didn't actually, I don't think we've ever talked about this, and it's not really getting the attention that it deserves because of other decisions that came out. But the Supreme Court a couple weeks ago, there was a very important case where they upheld an independent commission to draw legislative maps, and
in states that have referendums.
And that's a really important.
Yep.
That's a really important precedent, and that's obviously that's not how in most states. It's just like Pennsylvania, where you have whoever has control of the state legislature gets to draw the maps every 10 years when the census comes out. But I think that we'll see the good government movement seems to be gaining traction on a number of fronts, and this is one of them. And so looking forward to 2020, I think that there are actually some places that might cross party lines where you can get folks who might otherwise be enemies on every other policy issue to agree that something like an independent commission to draw the maps in as fair a way as possible, in as representative a way as possible, is something that other states should look at. So that was a really important decision, and like I said, didn't get a lot of attention because you had gay marriage and you had the Affordable Care Act that came out at the same time, basically.
Yeah, we talked about it here on the program because like you, I thought it was fairly significant and something that I think is important, because I think on a national level we have to look at how these districts are drawn, because no one really wants to be in the gas cloud.
Yeah, I worked at an organization a few years back that this is one of the main issues that it was working on ahead of 2010, and 2010 for Democrats was a devastating year when it came to state legislative chambers, and so what the result of that was, you had an election like 2014 or 2012 even, where you had Democrats nationwide running for congressional seats. One, it was 1 million whatever more votes, but they're in the minority by whatever at the time, whatever it was, 24 seats, and it's because of the way the maps were drawn. But it was really because of the performance of state house and state senate candidates, at the state level, because they got blown out in 2010. Yeah, they didn't have control of the maps.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the year after the year they here in Pennsylvania, Democrats won. I think it was all of the state state seats, the three, the treasurer, the auditor general, right, and the attorney general. 2012 or 2014, they won everything and ended up losing another seat in the House. It was like 5 for Democrats, 13 for Republicans. Democrats had by far more votes and still ended up losing the congressional delegation.
Right, and so I mean, even if I'm not saying I'm not saying that it's important for Democrats to win so that they can draw the maps in a way that is unfair.
No, I want competitive districts.
And some might say that. That's fair. Well, what I'm saying is, if you if you have an independent commission, and studies have been done on this, if you have an independent commission that draws maps as fairly as they should be drawn, the makeup of Congress would be much different.
Sure,
that's all I'm saying.
No, I'm with you. But I'm of the mindset I would like to see competitive districts. I would like it to see it be about issues and not about team sport. But then again, I guess I'm the eternal optimist and someone who believes in that democratic process and all of that stuff. And that's not good in the world of team sport.
No, not at all. And to be clear, for independent commissions, that's one of the things that they would be trying to do. And you have, there are some areas of a given state, and Pennsylvania is a great example of that. There are some areas where no matter what, just because of the demographics of the state and what have you, and where cities are, for example, that it's going to be difficult to draw a 51-49 kind of district.
No, I'm with you. I'd like the gas cloud that I live in.
Well, yeah, or the gas cloud where I grew up in, for example. Yeah, exactly. But
seriously, you got to take a look at the 30th senatorial district.
But the goal of those independent commissions is, in essence, to have as many of those competitive districts like you're talking about as possible. And certainly we can have in every state where there is not an independent commission, we can have a whole bunch more of those.
There you go. John, I appreciate you taking some time for us and musing a bit about what we should be doing and kind of laughing a bit about our paranoid caucus. I'd love to have you back again real soon.
I look forward to it, Rick. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks so much. John Neurohr, Communications Director over at Keystone Progress. You want to take a look at their website, go to thericksmithshow.com, click on John's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. A crew of mostly black soldiers were loading munitions onto ships at the Port Chicago Naval Magazine in California, northeast of Oakland. 320 soldiers were killed by a munitions explosion that wounded another 390 people. Troops were segregated. Black enlisted men were often given the worst and most dangerous non-combat jobs. All of the munition loaders at Port Chicago were African American. Every officer was white. The sailors were not given proper training in the loading of ammunition. The idea of loading munitions scared the soldiers. The officers lied and said the job was safe and that the weapons could not explode. They were wrong. The explosion caused a giant fireball that killed everyone on the ship and on the pier. The explosion could be heard 200 miles away. Of the 320 people killed, 202 were black. Only 51 bodies could be identified. Ordinarily, soldiers traumatized by the death of fellow soldiers were given 30 days leave. None of the black soldiers, not even those who were hospitalized, got leave. All of the white officers did. Surviving soldiers refused to load munitions. For that, they were arrested. 40 were charged with mutiny. The rest of the soldiers were also punished. They were sent to the Pacific Theater, forced to do menial duty. Many received bad conduct discharges at the end of the war, making them ineligible for military benefits. Those charged with mutiny were sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. When World War II ended, the imprisoned soldiers' sentences were reduced to 2 years. And in 1999, President Bill Clinton pardoned one of the survivors, 79-year-old Freddie Meeks. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing a slew full of flags of the Confederate States of America and the one we still argue about today. After the First Battle of Manassas, Southern General P.G.T. Beauregard resolved to change the Confederate flag due to the confusion of both friendly and enemy troops during the battle. Dedicated to the change, he asked his military aide for assistance. His aide? Well, it was one William Miles, former chairman of the Flag Committee, who already had a flag ready to go. Upon approval of the general, Miles requested from the existing Flag Committee that his battle flag be adopted as the second Confederate flag. It was formally rejected, but the flag that Miles had designed and favored from the beginning eventually became the official battle flag and ultimately the most popular flag of the Confederacy, the one we're fighting about 150 years later. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
I like that frame that John put out there. That you've got Scott Wagner here wanting to be the Donald Trump of Pennsylvania. I like that. I think it's interesting. I think it's something that maybe we run with a little bit. This kind of local kingpin who wants to be the big shot. Maybe some of the unions in the area, maybe they ought to go out after organizing his trash companies. It's kind of a thought. And the reason I bring that up is you look at Atlantic City right now. Unite Here Local 54 has authorized a strike against the Taj Mahal there in Atlantic City, which has Trump's name all over it. It is a Trump entertainment resort. They own it. Now they have 1,000 service workers. Your bartenders, your cooks, your housekeepers, bellmen, all of those folks, not the casino dealers. They voted on Thursday, which was yesterday, to allow the unions committee, negotiating committee, to call for a strike if nothing happens. Now, understand, their contract expired back in 2014, and what happened is Trump and the Trump entertainment resorts, they took their health care away. I believe they took their retirement away. They took all of this stuff back. I think there were some pay cuts involved in this. And what happened was the union took them to court and said that you can't just do away with people's pensions and dump their health care. That's something you have to negotiate. And it's gone through the court systems, and it's gone through the Third Court of Appeals and all of this stuff. And I guess from what the courts are saying, there's a possibility that the courts could restore the benefits. I think this is a good time for this because, after all, you've got now Donald Trump running around saying just how rich he is. You've got Donald Trump willing to say, I'm willing to spend whatever's necessary to become president, but he won't provide health care or pensions as contractually guaranteed to his employees. Am I missing something? And do you think he would be any better as president? I mean, I think these little things show the bigger picture. I think these little things are indicative of what someone would do when they sit into the big office, which is why I think the camera is important. If you don't think Scott Walker would, or Scott Wagner, Scott Walker, I don't know, I thought that, gee, could be twins. But, you know, if you don't think that Scott Wagner would do that while a sitting governor, the Richard Nixon of Pennsylvania, I think you got to think that through. Just troubling times ahead. Let's take a quick break. Right back.
Never turn. I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
It's Thursday, July 16, 2015.
I know I'm not a scientist, but here's the problem I've got with some people in my party.
Senator Lindsey Graham chides his fellow Republican candidates on global warming. Regional cap-and-trade programs bringing in the big bucks. Dirty coal is on the way out in the U.S. Plus,
we can be part of something that actually makes a difference to our future.
The climate action movement gets a big assist from a big boy band.
All of those big boys and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They're trying to regulate the amount of mercury emitted by power plants in the U.S.
Oh, great. More regulation. What next? How much feces they can put in our food? Big government. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I see you've got a story today about Lindsey Graham, the only one pretty much in the entire panoply of GOP candidates who actually isn't a full-on denier. Are you going to be making fun of him?
Actually, no, because I really appreciate the fact that he is not a total full-on denier.
I'm disappointed. I would have made fun of him, but all right, what do you got?
Go ahead. A Republican presidential candidate, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, hit back against members of his own party who don't accept the science behind climate change this week in an interview with late-night host Seth Meyers.
I know I'm not a scientist, but here's the problem I've got with some people in my party. When you ask the scientists what's going on, why don't you believe them? Right. If I went to 10 doctors and 9 said, hey, you're going to die, and 1 says you're fine, why would I believe the one guy? Right.
Okay, good point, but will it be enough to make anybody notice that Lindsey Graham is running for president in the Republican Party?
At this point, probably not.
Too bad, because on this point, he's absolutely right, which is one of the reasons why he will never win the nomination for the Republican Party.
Bad news for King Coal. For the first time in U.S. history, coal is no longer the dominant fuel source for the nation's electricity. According to an independent industry analysis, as of April of this year, cheaper, cleaner-burning natural gas has displaced coal as the top source of electricity. It now generates more than 30% of U.S. electricity, in part due to the fracking boom in the United States.
So sad to hear about coal.
Yeah, but then it does mean that fracking continues.
Yeah, well, pick your poison. But it's the beginning of the end for coal. So one battle at a time, Desi Doyen.
Well, it is definitely the beginning of the end for coal in Iowa. An electric utility company has agreed to phase out coal at 5 of its generating units in Iowa as part of a settlement with the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Justice to resolve violations of the Clean Air Act as part of a lawsuit brought by the Sierra Club. Alliant Energy will pay a $1.1 million fine, install pollution controls, and switch to cleaner burning natural gas or face shutdown. It's the 200th coal plant to shut down in the U.S. as part of the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign.
So sad.
States that have implemented regional carbon cap and trade programs are polluting less, and their economies are doing great.
That can't be. Chris Christie told us that cap and trade programs do not work, and that's why he pulled out of the regional cap and trade agreement up in the Northeast just weeks after he met with David Koch in a secret meeting in New York. But that's just a coincidence.
Well, for more details, that Northeast Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, also called RGGI, is an agreement by 9 northeastern states to cut the carbon dioxide emitted by their power plants. That program generated nearly $250 million for the Massachusetts economy and more than $1 billion for the other northeastern partner states. All money that Chris Christie and New Jersey will not be getting. And it cut the region's greenhouse gas emissions that cause global warming. Bloomberg News reports that the global race for renewable energy has passed a turning point. According to Bloomberg's global analysis, the world is now adding more electricity capacity with renewable energy each year than coal, natural gas, and oil combined. The shift occurred in 2013, according to Bloomberg, and it will continue to accelerate. Bloomberg projects that by 2030, 4 times as much new renewable electricity generation capacity will be built than fossil fuel power plants.
A lot of good news in this report, Desi Doyen. You feeling all right?
Yeah, I think actually some good things are happening, so it's important to talk about it.
All right.
Finally, the movement for climate action just got a big assist in reaching today's teenage girls. The insanely popular British boy band One Direction has launched a campaign to get their fans engaged in acting on climate change.
Please, will you join us to put pressure on our leaders? Become part of Action 1D. Make your voice heard and make 2015 the year we changed our futures forever.
Their new website to mark the launch of their campaign is called Action 1D for One Direction.
Does it matter that I don't really even know who One Direction is?
No, you're not their target audience.
It just makes me old, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For much more on all of the stories we covered today and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Old man.
That's what makes you beautiful.
Most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So the big news today. U.S. District Judge Pamela Chen, sentenced Michael Grimm, the former congressman, 8 months in federal prison for tax evasion. His lawyer had said, no, please, just give him probation. He didn't mean it, really, he didn't mean it. She's going to give him 8 months. He will report on his own sometimes there in September. Good. Maybe this will help rehabilitate him. And I was hoping to have Bob Ney on to talk about prison, but guess not. I guess we got Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here. Sorry, I don't think I can talk about prison as authoritatively as Mr. Ney.
Yeah, because I was wondering, do former legislators have like a prison boot camp that they can go to get prepared? I'm just kind of curious.
There are prison boot camps out there. I'm not sure if Bob Ney went to one, but he certainly came back with some advice for us, which was, pretty interesting to say the least.
Don't go.
Yeah, there we go. That was one of the top ones. But, it's actually interesting for him. He was supposed to go to sort of a, fancy white-collar one, but there was sort of a, last-minute change that was made before he went, and he ended up going to a, I guess, legitimate prison, and, I guess that was significantly less fun than, he was looking forward to, obviously. But he made it out okay, and he's with us now and has pretty interesting stories.
Yeah, he told me it was like a diet plan. He said he lost like 65 pounds on the prison diet.
Yeah, he looked pretty good when he came out,
I guess if you look at the slop that, and he could, as you said, speak more authoritatively on it. The slop that they feed you, I'm sure, not something you could gain weight on anyway.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe me and you should both go to prison and see what happens.
No.
Okay, fair enough.
No, that's one thing no. I've spent a night in jail once, and that was enough.
I understand.
No, thanks. Don't want to be locked in a cage like a dog, which is why I pay my taxes.
That's always a good point.
Well, I mean, at the end of it, look, Al Capone got away with all of the stuff he got away with, and what did they end up getting him on? Tax evasion.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's that simple. All right, let's move on. Let's find out what's going on. Big shooting yesterday. Did ISIS do it?
That's of course sort of the big question, and unsurprisingly, a good number of GOP lawmakers have sort of jumped the gun on that front. The chairman of the Homeland Security Committee for the House, Michael McCaul, came out and said that this looks like this is an ISIS-inspired shooting. In response to that, the FBI chairman in charge of the case, Ed Reinhold, held a press conference today in which he said that there does not appear to be any indication that this was, in fact, carried out by someone linked to ISIS so far. But of course, this is still in the preliminary phases of this, and the FBI, of course, has sort of a loose definition of ties to ISIS. With the situation in Phoenix when there was the Drama Muhammad contest, there was sort of cries of an ISIS link, even though that only extended to Twitter conversations with members of, affiliated with ISIS and the shooters in question, rather than any material support that we could tell so far. But nevertheless, this is something that, lawmakers are, of course, getting a little bit worried about.
Is this something that this guy could have, in his head, thought he was, we're going to take this on for Allah and for ISIS without actually having any real connection other than, as you pointed out, maybe a missed Twitter feed?
That is certainly a possibility, and that's what a lot of the sort of new sort of Al-Qaeda and ISIS affiliates are kind of pushing for, just this notion that you can sort of act as a lone wolf attacker without getting direct material support. Just sort of having the psychological backing of the of various terror networks or the radical movement at large, which is sort of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's probably good that a lot of the people within the U.S. aren't going to be getting material support and whatnot. But on the other hand, it makes it a lot harder to predict when you have these sort of lone wolf shooters. So it's I don't want to preach terror, and I don't want to tell your listeners to start panicking and whatnot, but it is sort of something that's a little bit disconcerting, particularly for those of us living within the Beltway.
I mean, and the other question that comes up is, the ease of people getting guns. To me, just it seems too easy to grab something like this and be able to pull something like this off.
That's very true, and of course, one of the responses that we saw in regards to this latest attack was a call for lawmakers to lift sort of the gun bans at recruiting stations or other military installations, essentially an answer with, more guns in response to this. But one that, a lot of them are saying is justified in the outcome of this. But this certainly does raise questions over the access to guns, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot more information as time, develops over how exactly this individual got, his weapon.
See, now what's interesting to me is that you on military bases, people aren't walking around with guns. I mean, in the military base, I would expect that everyone would have a gun.
Exactly. And, that was something I came into some pretty strict debate when we had the initial Navy Yard shooting, and it's something that's come up time and time again when we've had situations like Fort Hood and whatnot. But as it stands right now, there hasn't really been any strict movement to try to open up access to arms for those who live on military bases.
So now the question that I have then is, in the military, because we all love the military, we're told, they've chosen not to have their community saturated with guns. And I'd be curious to know why, given the military, their job is to have the guns, especially the really big ones, why they've chosen not to make sure that everyone on their military base is carrying a gun, because after all, that is their job.
That's a very good question. I don't have an exact answer for that, but I would imagine it would just be that, having, I guess, a widely armed, population is, inherently sort of risky and something you don't want to have when it comes to military bases. And in particular, we know that there are, consequences of, access to guns and whatnot that extend beyond just, mass shootings and whatnot. It's easier for individuals to commit suicide and follow through with it if they have, weapons and whatnot. You're more likely to injure people by accident than you are, intentionally, but I'm not really sure exactly why what the exact justification is for the military's decision on this front.
Now, I would be curious to find out what that is, because look, if they're saying exactly what you said, if that's the argument that, having all these guns around, not really good because there are always accidents, who knows what could happen. We've chosen in a profession, in an industry where those are our tools, not to carry our tools everywhere. I don't know why we've got politicians and activists and all of these mouthpieces going, we should have that kind of a society.
That's a very good point. This is sort of a good testing ground for it. It seems to, for the most part, have kind of escaped a lot of attention. But I'm sure there's going to be sort of a new debate that's going to come up. And again, it's sort of one of these issues where we have a shooting and then we see a lot of other issues pop up societally. And in this situation, I don't see any difference in that. But of course, this is going to be one of those things where we have a lot of debates, but we're probably not going to see much change considering how polarizing of an issue all these aspects are.
Nothing's going to change. Absolutely nothing. Let's move on to Iran. I hear the saber rattlings. I hear the anger. We're not going to do this. What are the chances of Congress approving it?
Right now, it's almost certain that Congress is likely going to move to reject the Iran deal as it stands, and it basically means right now that it'll be up for the congressional Democrats to uphold a presidential veto. Today, from the White House briefing room, Josh Earnest warned that if the Iran deal was to be fully rejected by Congress and then override the presidential veto, it would have devastating consequences for the U.S. In particular. This would sort of lead to a situation where some of the sanctions would be lifted, but the other aspects of the Iran deal would sort of stay in place, giving the U.S. no leverage when it comes to enforcing the goal of a nuclear-free Iran. Right now it looks like it's sort of wavy in terms of Democratic support. There are a lot of high-profile Democrats who have voiced, concern with the Iran deal as it stands. Nancy Pelosi has come out in favor of it, which is a pretty good sign considering she's historically been able to keep the majority of the party in line once she comes into place behind an issue. But nevertheless, it's something that the White House is eyeing very carefully and hoping to push forward with a pretty big round of support in the coming days and weeks.
Where's Hillary on this? Has she come out with a statement?
I haven't been, closely watching the Hillary campaign in the past few days. I apologize, but supporters of her have been saying that she is supporting the deal. I haven't heard if she's given an exact statement, but apparently in the meeting with lawmakers behind closed doors, she did say that this was a deal that she would support. But of course, she is on the campaign trail right now, so I would be sort of surprised if this becomes something that she's going to fight for pretty heavily, considering how controversial this issue has become.
So if Congress says no, does the deal go into place without us? Because this is kind of a global agreement. I mean, there are a lot of countries involved. It's not just us, right?
Exactly. That's what the White House is trying to maintain today. This is a five-nation, five-nation deal. There's the global community that they've been working with who are in support of this, and essentially this would, as the White House has said, ostracize the U.S. from our international partners in terms of this deal. And that's something that they've been warning against, since it would damage the United States' reputation at large, and also lead to some pretty serious national security concerns in terms of Iran being able to move forward without strict U.S. involvement. And that is something that has raised quite a bit of concern from the White House.
All right, scorched earth, gotta love that. And finally, will Cheech and Chong have a revival? Will we be digging up all the old Cheech and Chong movies, or is it just going to be a commercial in Denver?
This is Rick's Book Show, where you discuss the most important issues of the day as your bumper announces. So it looks like there is going to be TV history that's going to be made next week. In Denver, a pot company is going to air the first legal marijuana commercial on television. This is going to be a company called Neo, who sells THC vapes, vaporizers to customers, and they are going to be sponsoring a segment before the Jimmy Kimmel Show, showing after 10 p.m. Next week. And this is the first of its kind. This is the first legal marijuana commercial, and it's in line with a number of sort of state rules that have been put in place after marijuana was legalized, including that it has to occur after 10 o'clock. It has to occur on a program that receives a certain percentage of viewers who are over 21 years old, the legal age in which you are able to purchase marijuana. And it seems to be pretty fitting, considering Jimmy Kimmel's pretty unwatchable unless you're pretty high.
All right, then. Tell us what you really think, then.
I'm a Jimmy Fallon guy, but, you know, whatever.
That should be interesting. I can't wait to see the Up in Smoke commercial, then.
That should be fun. I can't wait.
There you go. All righty, Justin. I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, Rick.
Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Your standard governor, Congress critter, and other elected officials routinely insist that they represent the people. But when it comes to making public policy, do they actually represent you or Mr. Money, who writes big campaign checks? Right. Any pretension that we live in a self-governing democratic republic is gone. It's been snuffed out by a tiny club of big money donors, only about 600 people out of our population of 330 million. They've empowered themselves to choose candidates, control the public debate, and bend public policy to their selfish interests. Both major political parties are complicit in this kleptocratic transformation, Republicans by aggressively pushing it, and Democrats by passively acquiescing to it. While Barack Obama has done nothing to stop this money perversion of democracy, he's at least made noise about making the thieves disclose their theft. But noise is not action, and the GOP's enablers of the thievery have even moved to kill Obama's modest disclosure ideas. In June, for example, House Republicans quietly voted to prohibit the SEC, the shareholders' watchdog, from requiring CEOs to tell the corporate owners how much of their money is being spent on particular political candidates. Another GOP backroom proviso would keep the IRS from disclosing the names of corporate tax law manipulators that use so-called social welfare groups to funnel money anonymously into partisan political campaigns. Also, a third Republican hide-and-seek provision would allow corporations that get billions of dollars in taxpayer funds to avoid telling us the names of lawmakers they're showering with campaign cash. This is Jim Hightower saying, the torrent of secret corporate money in our elections is hosing our democratic ideals and possibilities, blasting the people out of the process, and imposing big money governance over America.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From Boston, Massachusetts, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. The United Nations Security Council has chosen the language for a resolution endorsing this week's Iranian nuclear deal, and a vote on that resolution is scheduled for this coming Monday at 9 a.m. The decision to expedite the vote has prompted strong criticism from U.S. lawmakers who want to debate the deal for 60 days before any UN action. The lead U.S. negotiator in the nuclear deal, Wendy Sherman, wasn't sympathetic to those concerns, telling reporters Thursday that since the deal was drafted by the permanent 5 members of the Security Council with an eye toward quick UN approval, it would be unrealistic to ask them to wait for national approval. No word yet on whether any heads of state or foreign ministers will attend Monday's vote. And Friday will mark 1 year since the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 in eastern Ukraine, and disturbing new footage has emerged this week showing Russian rebel forces sifting through the debris of the aircraft shortly after it crashed. The video supports the theory that rebels believed they had downed a Ukrainian airliner before realizing that they'd actually hit another aircraft after finding luggage tags belonging to Australian tourists. There are efforts afoot to pass a UN Security Council resolution establishing an international tribunal to investigate the crash, and a draft text of such a resolution references that sanctions could be levied against those found responsible. But securing approval for such a move could be difficult. In a phone call with Dutch Foreign Minister Mark Rutte today, Russian President Vladimir Putin condemned the, quote, prematureness and counterproductivity, end quote, of debating the creation of any such tribunal, while investigations into the incident are still ongoing. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The animals, trap, 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 till the cages fall. The cages fall, stay awake in the dark, count mistakes. The light was off.
Sanity for a change. The Rick Smith Show.
Days new, and everyone is waiting, waiting on you. And you got time.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Yeah, Michael Grimm's going to have some time. Time to sit behind bars and think about the way things used to be. Back when you could threaten to throw someone off the balcony and threaten reporters and all of that stuff. The good old days. Anyway, some good news going into the weekend. On July 14th, the company WorkX Printing Cooperative launched its, what they're saying is, one of the first of its kind, a plan to change the world one project at a time. They are owned by their employees, and their employees are members of United Steelworkers Local 2936 in Auburn, Massachusetts. They offer various T-shirt options, all of which are ethical, union-made T-shirts, which I kind of like that word, ethical. They're union-made, eco-friendly, which is a good thing. They use a water-based ink and a digital printer that uses 95% less water and 55% less energy than other printers. And so you can kind of look at this and go, hey, I need to get a printing project done. WorkX would be the place to go because they're going to pay their employees a reasonable wage, and they're going to be environmentally friendly, and they're conscious of that. To me, those are the kind of business choices you should have. Do I want to buy a product from a company that's going to do the right thing, be it for the environment, for their workforce, for the community, all that stuff, or do I want the greedy capitalists who just all they care about is price? If I can screw my workers and cheat them out of their wages and more for me, hooray! Because that's the world we're kind of moving towards, right? I mean, I look at the Scott Walkers of the world and the Scott Wagners of the world. This idea that we can screw our workforces. You look at what Walker did in Wisconsin, you look at what Wagner does here, same idea. If we can cheat, we win. That's not the business model that I think as a nation we want to pursue. And I'm hoping there's going to be some pushback to this kind of insanity, along with the whole deregulation and all that as well. I don't know if you saw this story, and this is where we'll kind of finish the week out on. The Republicans are pushing, and again, holding us hostage. Another great hostage situation, because you know that the transportation money goes belly up at the end of this month, right? So all of those transportation projects that are being done will come to a screeching halt when the cash dries up here in just like 2 weeks. They're working on it, I guess, on legislation that would fund some of this. But in order to get the funding to keep these projects going, what you've got is you got Republicans who are throwing in poison kind of pills. You may remember we had a couple of train accidents. We've had a bunch of bomb trains going down the road. Well, back in 2008, they actually passed legislation that said that you had to put all of these brake controls into place so that you can't have runaway bomb trains. Seemed fairly rational back in 2008. And here 7 years later, you go, okay, you had 7 years. How come it hasn't happened? Well, we need more time. So the Republicans are pushing a piece of legislation, an amendment to all of this that would, who knows, implement delays for years to come. And they evidently don't want the electronically controlled braking system on the cars there. They also want to delay another provision that gives freight and commuter rails and Amtrak time to install safety systems, the positive control stuff like we saw in Philadelphia. This was already supposed to be done. Yet here we go again. Oh, it's going to be costly. Oh, we can't do it. Oh, it's bad. Now understand, this braking stuff, the NTSB is saying that if you had this in place, it could have prevented the Amtrak derailment in May. Yet here again, and this isn't just, see what the Republicans are doing, but it is. See what the Republicans are doing. This is their ideology. This is what they believe, that there should be no government intervention. And I think you have to take this into consideration next time you pull that lever. Or maybe the next time a bomb train comes through your area. Just kind of a thought. Anyway, it's been a very fun week. We started off in Washington, D.C. at the American Federation of Teachers Conference. Had a good week this week. And look, the gift that keeps on giving. Senator Scott Wagner is, just pure, in my view, pure gold. You need to have some craziness like that occasionally to make things a little entertaining. And it hath been an entertaining week. If you missed any portions of our program this week, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. All of them are there. So if you missed anything, everything's right there, right in front of you. And good stuff. If you want to get the app, the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone, take the program on the go, wherever you go. Always there in your pocket. Just flip it on. Go, hey, yeah, there he is. Also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We will be back. Hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing you back here on Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's covered like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, and amorous ray. Democracy is coming to lay with S.A.